Tonight, 32 young men are going to have their lives changed because the NFL draft is going to happen. Their dreams will come true, and forever, 29 organizations, at least in round one tonight, are going to look a little bit different. So the story is going to be written here, and we are going to be the ones that are going to help tell it. It's me, Joey P, Joe Pisapia, everybody, and welcome to night one of the NFL draft right here on Fantasy Pros YouTube channel. Joining me to kick things off today, the Minnesota Madman, the man who is hanging out with Colin Cowherd in his spare time. Thor Nystrom is here tonight with us. He has been knee-deep, neck-deep, I believe, in NFL draft is probably more accurate for, I don't know, the last 6 months, maybe even more. And, of course, Andrew Erickson's joining us from Betting Pros, Mr. Big Pod Energy himself. He will be helping to break down some of the wagering aspects of tonight. But we're here for one thing. Your fantasy teams, because whether you are playing redraft, whether you are playing in dynasty or keeper leagues, the players that go tonight are going to have a huge impact on all of those leagues in 2024 and beyond. And Thor Nystrom, we'll start with you because, again, the preparation for this is pretty much, I don't know. It might as well just be probably July of last year. That's probably more accurate. So what's it like when you do all this work, all this research, all these games, all this tape, all these names to finally get to the night of the draft?
Yeah, that was the work. Now is the fun. For 2.5 months, 3 months, we have been talking about all these different possibilities. Who could, especially in my neck of the woods, the trade up possibilities, the 4 quarterbacks, where are they going to go? Can you jump someone in line to grab one of those guys? And then all these other stud offensive prospects we have, where their landing spots are going to be. We finally are going to get answers tonight. So it's all going to happen. But yeah, I'm here for it.
Now, speaking of your neck of the woods, I told Thor, hey, it's draft night, so I'm going to wear a jacket. Let's get dressed up. Let's be classy. In the neck of the woods where Thor is, this is dressed up, everybody. This is his best flannel. He's wearing it tonight for all of you. More dressing up to come later in the program. Andrew Erickson representing the brand. That's what you do here. Erickson, be honest. How many bets have you wagered on the NFL draft so far, or have you stopped counting?
So luckily with the Betting Pros app, it counts for you. So it made it really easy for me. So I've registered over 100 bets on the NFL draft. So every single pick, every single player, I'm going to have a sweat about some way, somehow. So it's going to be fun.
Well, we'll get the towel in for you. And speaking of that, our NFL draft coverage is brought to you by Betting Pros. Now, if you haven't used it already, we want you to give it a chance because it is the best set of tools out there possibly for you to make your wagers on sports. We want you to bet smarter, not harder. So download the app today. There's all sorts of fun competitions. We've got an NFL draft competition going where you don't have to make wagers. You just make picks. Again, accuracy leaderboards, whether it be prop bet cheat sheets for every single player in every single game, whether it be all the breakdowns or the best lines that you're looking for in order to make your wagers. Betting Pros has it all. So head over to bettingpros.com to check it out. But we recommend you just download the app. It's fun. It's exciting, just like tonight is going to be. So Thor Nystrom, let's go back to you here because we are going to hang out for the first hour or so. This is kind of the hardest part, as Tom Petty once upon a time once said. The waiting is the hardest part because we waited so many months and months, and now we are finally this close. But it's going to be a good hour and change until we get there. So let's take a look at your top 10 board as it is right now and go over the top 10 prospects because it feels like we pretty much know exactly how things are going to go here in the first few picks, or at least the first 2. 3 could be a little different. We don't know if teams are going to trade in. Again, I said 29 teams because that's how many are drafting tonight, but that could change as people start to move into the first, out of the first. Who knows what the Denver Broncos might do? So let's break down the first few guys here. And obviously we're talking about some quarterbacks at the top. So take us through these first 3 that you have on your big board.
Yeah, so top 3 guys on my board, quarterbacks, like you mentioned. Caleb Williams, of course, at the top. I view that as the free spot. So do the Chicago Bears. Jayden Daniels at number 2. Had some debate, internal debate between Jayden and JJ McCarthy, but I did end up siding with Jayden Daniels. That one's a bit closer. JJ, of course, number 3. Marvin Harrison Jr. is number 4 on my board, followed by Malik Nabers, my wide receiver 2. At number 6, Joe Alt, the offensive tackle from Notre Dame. I just think that kid's a stud. He has the NFL bloodlines. Father, of course, was the offensive tackle. And then he's in that 6'9", 321-pound package with 99th percentile athleticism. It was dominant the last 2 years at Notre Dame. 7, I have Rome Odunze, my wide receiver 3. We've been talking about the wide receivers a lot this process. They are not going to have to wait long tonight to hear their names called. Odunze is the interesting one. I think he's the one where it's the Giants, at 6, or if he gets past them, the Jets, the other New York team I know is lurking. They're a team that's very interested in Odunze. Be interesting to see where he falls between that 6 and 10 slot. My 8th slot is Drake Maye, the quarterback from UNC. Like his ceiling, I see the same stuff that other people do as far as the arm talent. A little bit more risk there is how I see his evaluation, and you're going to need patience and maybe a good situation for him. So we'll find out tonight if we're about to find out if he gets that. Number 9, Brock Bowers, the tight end from Georgia. Really, he is just a ball advancer guy. Get the ball in his hands, deployed wherever in the formation you want to. He is going to advance the ball for you. And then rounding out my top 10 is JC Latham, the bully of a right tackle from Alabama, a guy that you do not want to be in a phone booth with, 6'6", 343. And when he comes forward, like I said, he moves bodies.
So are there still phone booths in your quote unquote neck of the woods? Do those still exist? Because I haven't seen one of those in a long time. I'm just curious.
I'll tell you the last time I seen a phone booth. We went to the Falkland Islands. The Falkland Islands, they have a connection with the British Empire going back a while. The Falkland Islands are between the bottom of South America and then Antarctica. It's this little island out in the middle of nowhere. But because of this, they have red phone booths still on the Falkland Islands. It's only like a 1 mile long island. But they got
Erickson, I bet you knew that, right? You knew that the Falkland Islands still had phone booths available for you to use. Have you ever used a phone booth, Erickson? Have you ever even used one?
He doesn't know what it is.
What are the Falkland Islands? That's what I want to know.
It's just a little speck out there in the ocean.
Okay. Tell me this, Erickson. Have you ever put money into a phone and used it like a payphone? Has that ever happened in your lifetime?
I took pictures in London next to a phone booth because I thought it was like a tourist attraction.
There you go. Good times. Yeah. All right, let's go back to this board here because a lot of experts have Drake Maye as the number 3 overall quarterback. Thor, you've got him slightly lower, obviously, in JJ McCarthy instead of that 3 spot. Was that always the case for you when you were evaluating these two, or is this a conclusion that you came to as you've been doing research as the season has ended and now you start to evaluate them a little bit closer?
Yeah, I think since early on in the process, first time I was out there publicly with it was, I believe, in February. But, obviously my job, as you guys know, in the fall, it's the college football. I had a lot of exposure to JJ McCarthy and Drake Maye. And because of the work that I saw of JJ McCarthy, particularly down the stretch against the murderous row of defenses that Michigan played and getting to that college national championship game and winning it, JJ took his game to another level. And so that, coming in, watching the cut-ups of him, watching the cut-ups of Maye, a little bit lower on Maye. Maye had a disappointing season in 2023, regressed a little bit. People give him the contextual benefit of the doubt, the Drake Maye supporters, on almost every account without sort of looking at it the other way. And the other way is Drake Maye was dominant his first 10 games of his career in 2022. Was against a pretty poor ACC schedule up until then. Last couple games of 2022, he struggled. Phil Longo then leaves. Josh Downs leaves. And Antoine Green leaves. Those last 2 guys left for the NFL. This year, there was a little bit of statistical regression, but more to the point of the NFL evaluation. Some what I refer to as weeds in his game cropped up a little bit more this past season. And it's nothing that is nullifying or anything like that. It's just one of those things where he needs a coaching staff that believes in him, where early on you're going to exercise that patience and you're going to meticulously pull those weeds out one by one. If you can do that, you will have a star on your hands. He absolutely has the tools to be an NFL superstar at quarterback, but you have to acknowledge some of the risk in the profile.
And fantastic gardening metaphors as well. I really enjoyed that. It was quite good. Erickson, let's get to your quarterback take here. Is Caleb Williams number 1 for you as well in terms of a fantasy prospect? Is Jayden Daniels 2? Do you have Drake Maye as the 3, or is it JJ McCarthy? How do you rank these 4 quarterbacks that right now it seems like 1 and 2 kind of a lock, and then 3 and 4 is a little bit more open for debate?
Yeah, so for fantasy rankings, I do have Caleb Williams and Jayden Daniels as the 1-2. I think that Caleb Williams is in kind of rare territory when it comes to a number 1 overall pick landing in such a good situation. Mostly number 1 overall picks at quarterback land on the worst teams in the NFL, but the Bears are not that team. Like, the Bears have the 9th pick and the first pick because they were only the 9th worst team last year, or they're picking 9. So they have Carolina's first round pick. So Caleb Williams is going to a team with weapons. He's going to a team that's going to potentially add more weapons at that number 9 overall pick. So I like him a lot from a fantasy perspective. Jayden Daniels offers that rushing upside. Again, it does come with a little bit of injury concerns where he needs to kind of, when it comes to his rushing, he can't take big hits like he did in college. Like, he did that all the time, and that's just not going to fly at the NFL level. Like, he's going to get banged up, especially with more of a skinnier frame. But I do think those guys are the clear cut top 2 when it comes to fantasy perspective. I think JJ McCarthy, yes, I think that he needs weapons around him to really produce for fantasy. Not to say he can't be a runner. He is athletic, but wasn't asked to do a lot of necessarily rushing to the extent like Jayden Daniels and even Caleb Williams, especially around the goal line, where Caleb Williams can actually do a lot. I think he can score a lot of rushing touchdowns. But then with Drake Maye, my concern is, if a team does draft him, do they sit him? Like, does he not play a full schedule of games? And that would obviously hurt him in fantasy because, okay, he's not playing enough games. Like, you can't score fantasy points when you're on the bench. So I think that Drake Maye is definitely a long-term play, which is why in Dynasty, I still have him ranked as my QB2. But like, for redraft, like, I would expect Jayden Daniels to be more productive in year 1. And actually, I do have Jayden Daniels ahead of Drake Maye in Dynasty because what you do in year 1 matters. Like, I know that a lot of us will look at, oh, well, I think in the long term he's going to be better, but what affects his value when we're talking about these guys next year? Look at Anthony Richardson, for example. Like, he played 4 games and is a QB5 in Dynasty because he had 2 good games. Like, that's all it takes with a young quarterback. So Jayden Daniels could go out, have a couple of games, score a couple rushing touchdowns, then he could get hurt. And then what? Oh, we look up, he's a top 10 quarterback. Whereas if Drake Maye sits the entire year, only plays a couple games, Jayden Daniels is going to have more value when we're talking about these guys next year. So I think you just get ahead of it with Jayden Daniels and a guy like Caleb Williams. And then for me, it's like a tier break with Drake Maye and JJ McCarthy.
Now, Thor, typically you see Marvin Harrison on people's boards ahead of Malik Nabers. Some people like Nabers more. A lot of people will tell you that if Marvin Harrison was not in this class, then Malik Nabers would be the slam dunk number 1. But here's a question for you, Thor. If Malik Nabers goes in the right situation, is there a universe where he is a more valuable asset opposed to Marvin Harrison, who we project to go to the Cardinals if he lands in a different place? Does that scenario exist for you? And if so, what team would that be for Nabers to fall to?
Yeah, I mean, whether you're just talking about straight NFL utility or whether you're talking about fantasy utility, the answer would be yes, but particularly for the fantasy one. Obviously, the landing spot, very important with that. The guy who ends up going to if the Giants do take a wide receiver as opposed to the quarterback, we don't know yet if that was a smokescreen, but the quarterback play wouldn't be great there initially. They would be looking for a quarterback next offseason, but you are wide open to get pounded with targets right away. Obviously, Harrison, if he ends up going to Arizona, it's the same thing. You're walking into these terrible receiving cores. But yeah, you're wondering about the quarterback play in both of them. But Malik Nabers is going to catch a metric ton of balls in the NFL. Marvin Harrison Jr. is as well. Marvin Harrison Jr. the last couple of years combined was 100th percentile in receiving grade against man coverage, against single man coverage. That's why teams threw so many double teams at him. The analytical profile on Marvin Harrison Jr. and the way that he changed the behavior of defensive coordinators, defenses in general, but the way that he changed the behavior of the defensive coordinators with the strategy heading in, just tossing all kinds of looks at him and then just the rote double teams. You're not getting the single coverage anymore because we know you're going to destroy us. So like, he is the guy that I side with, but those 3 guys are so great at the top. And Nabers, like you mentioned, if you go at the last 10 wide receiver classes and you put Nabers in each of them, he would be wide receiver 1 in more than he would not be.
When you're trying to evaluate Brock Bowers, Andrew Erickson, I know this is a prospect everybody's very excited about. We've seen some tight end prospects recently. Dalton Kincaid, very exciting. Certainly saw some spurts out of him. Kyle Pitts, obviously that first year. Huge yardage total, but it's kind of disappointing ever since. Is Brock Bowers kind of in line to have these growing pains, do you think, where we get very excited, but then it takes a couple years maybe for him to really reach his promise? Or do you think Bowers is potentially a different sort of prospect than the other 2?
Tell me what team he goes to, Joe. Like, I think with tight end,
If I could, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would have wagered everything on it, and I would be on my yacht right now. That's probably where I would be. But instead, I'm here with you, hanging out, talking, which is probably the second favorite place that I'd like to be, to be honest.
I'm glad to hear that. But when it comes to Bowers and just the tight end position, you look at Brock Bowers, a lot of teams have him as their number 2 pass catcher overall, like ahead of Nabers, ahead of Rome Odunze, only behind Marvin Harrison Jr., because he's really looked at more as like a big slot receiver, not really an inline tight end. But the issue is if a team drafts him, like, oh, like he can play traditional tight end, like let's put him there. It's very dependent on the team that he goes to. Just look at last year, right? We had 3 tight ends in the top, first round, second round discussion: Dalton Kincaid, Michael Mayer, Sam Laporta. One of them had the worst landing spot at the Raiders. The other 2 had spots where they could immediately step in and get targets. And those guys smashed. And Michael Mayer, we're hoping, is this guy ever going to play? Like, that's the concern. And even with Kyle Pitts, a couple years back, he went to Atlanta. He had Matt Ryan year 1. It was good. He didn't have Matt Ryan the last 2 years, and it's been bad. So I think Brock Bowers, the upside with him is astronomical. But it depends on the team that he goes to. Like, I don't want him to go to the Jets. I don't want Nathaniel Hackett to get anywhere near that guy because it's not going to be good. So for me, the team that's been rumored to be in the Bowers camp, I know the Rams have been a team that's been discussed as trading up inside the top 10. Would love to see him with the Rams as a basically Cooper Kupp 2.0 at tight end. Shane Steichen and the Colts, they need a tight end.
That would be nice.
So like, that's what I want. I want one of these offensive-minded coaches to go up and get Brock Bowers and not have him fall into the laps of a guy like Nathaniel Hackett, even like a Shane Waldron. I'm not super confident that he's going to necessarily use him in the way that we want for fantasy. It's definitely there. The ceiling is there, but it's going to depend on what team drafts him.
Thor, you put a comp on Brock Bowers to George Kittle. Can you walk us through that and why?
Yeah, the physical dimension's very similar, and then the way he's going to terrify defenses once he gets out on the route path, and then also the machinations when he has the ball in his hands are all pretty similar. I also liked evoking in my own mind the San Francisco 49ers as well, because I also think of Brock Bowers as the Deebo Samuel of tight ends, where you can do end around stuff with him, you can bring him into the backfield. You could put him there as a single back a couple times a game if you want to start confusing the defense, do all that different kind of the stuff that San Francisco likes to do. But with Bowers, you can go all the way to the one side of the polarity. I don't think it's like instructive to think of him as a tight end, like I was sort of mentioning before, but I'll go further than that. I think he's idiot proof. Like I obviously Nathaniel Hackett is.
Well, if anyone's going to test that theory,
yeah, but like I really don't think someone could screw Brock Bowers up. Keep in mind, Brock Bowers goes to Georgia as a true freshman. He's at this point he's like 6'3" and he's 235 pounds, just coming out of high school. That team had George Pickens, Ladd McConkey was on that roster. They had another NFL receiver right away, but then Marcus Rosemy-Jackson, Kyrus Jackson, blanket on one of the other dudes. Adonai Mitchell was also in that receiving room. Brock Bowers led that team in receiving yards as a true freshman. Then he did it the next 2 years as well. Was a first-team All-American all 3 of those seasons. Beyond that, Kirby Smart said if they had shifted him to running back, he would have been their starting running back. So, like, I know that people and fantasy players in particular are skittish about the Kyle Pitts thing. Kyle Pitts was the huge seam stretcher that had the awesome athleticism and had the ball skills downfield. It's a totally different thing. Brock Bowers, it's like the Deebo Samuel at tight ends. You just get him the ball anywhere, short, intermediate. He can certainly win long, and you can play him on the boundary. Georgia did some of that as well. But you just get the ball in his hands, and he will advance it forward. That's Brock Bowers.
All right. By the way, Erickson, when I get that yacht, the first place I'm going? Falkland Islands. That's right, Falkland Islands. All right, before we continue on with our preview of the 2024 NFL Draft, don't forget, everybody, our Discord is rocking and rolling and ready to hang out with you. It's free to join. FantasyPros.com/Discord. That is the place to join up for that. We have a draft channel for all of this draft discussion going on. So if you want to be part of that discussion, head over to our Discord. Again, it's free. There's a million channels in there. If you're playing everything from fantasy football to fantasy baseball, if you're wagering, we've got everything in there. Again, FantasyPros.com/chat, free to join. So join us for that chat, and we will have a good time talking NFL draft there. There's lots of our experts in there in that chat as well, and it's red hot right now, so we want you to jump in there if you have the time and give us your take. Give us your predictions. That's what we're looking for here as we continue on with the NFL draft preview. Now, it seems like we have a pretty good beat on what's going to happen in terms of, let's say, picks 1 through 4. It seems like we have at least an idea of that. It's when we start to get to pick 5 that I think things get a little bit more interesting here. And that means the Los Angeles Chargers. So we're going to see if the Chargers stay at 5 or do not. We could take a look at some of the needs of the Los Angeles Chargers, too. They got a new head coach, Harbaugh, coming in here from back to the NFL, I should say, from Michigan. So he's getting another take here. A pretty good career as a quarterback himself. He's got a quarterback already laid in there. But Thor, when we start to look at the Los Angeles Chargers and the needs of that team, obviously he's talked a lot about offensive tackle. That's been something that he has talked quite a bit about, building from the inside out. When you are looking at that and the needs of the Los Angeles Chargers, what do you think they do? Do they stay here at 5 or do they trade out?
Well, I'm sort of smiling because as you're setting that up with the 5th pick and the Chargers' intentions, I'm getting a couple of messages about how the 5th pick slot odds, the board on that has been getting nuked with one prospect in particular here over the last 15, 20 minutes. JJ McCarthy's getting some late steam from the betting market for that 5th slot. I don't know that we got something in the air about the Vikings trying to hop the Giants potentially, or we'll see. Could it be the Broncos? Could it be the Giants flipping spots? Someone in the market thinks they know something because there is some late money coming in on it. But as far as the Chargers go, offensive line, I think, is the thing that we have all supposed is going to be the first pick, regardless of whether it's at 5, if it's at 11. Say in a trade down scenario with the Vikings. Jim Harbaugh, first of all, if you know anything about the guy's career, you would just have that supposition heading in. But then he didn't leave anything to chance in your imagination. At the owners' meeting, all he could talk about was like, I can't wait to get in there and start working on that offensive line. He just kept going on and on about the offensive line. Oh, we got to build up from the offensive line. That's, and all this different stuff. I would be surprised if their first selection is not an offensive lineman. Again, regardless of the slot that it occurs in. Joe Alt has always been the presumptive favorite for that, certainly is my favorite offensive line prospect and what's a very good offensive tackle class. JC Latham, though, has been the dark horse here, and some plugged-in people have tossed him out for the Chargers, including Daniel Jeremiah, who is, it has connections around that team and does their the broadcasting, the preseason, whatever. Mm-hmm. He put in his last mock draft JC Latham number 5 to the Chargers. I think a more JC Latham along the lines of what Harbaugh looks to build around. That's exactly the guy. It's the hammer. Like on that side of the line, we are going to cave you in on the run game. I know I'll be able to run outside the right tackle for the next 5 years of this guy's contract at least. But like the more acceptable price point, I think for him would he's 10 on my board. I'd rather, if you can get him at 11 than 5, seems like a little bit of a reach. Joe Alt, I think you can justify the cost there, but that's the 3-dimensional chess I think going on. And it's interesting to see what's happening in the betting market right now with that slot.
All right, Erickson, the Chargers were 5-13 last year. Obviously, Brandon Staley took them nowhere. That was never long for this world. They had some cap issues as well. Keenan Allen gets moved to Chicago. Mike Williams gets moved on. He ends up with the Jets. J.K. Dobbins comes in the house. All the old Baltimore running backs now found a home with another Harbaugh. Last year, you look at the draft. Obviously, the first pick there, Quentin Johnson, was not a good start there for the Los Angeles Chargers last year. So what do you think we see differently tonight? Are you where Thor is too, where they go offensive line no matter where it is, just lock up that tackle and then continue to build there and just take more picks and kind of get the organization back on track? Because it does feel like the Chargers are off of it right now.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they have a lot of needs, even going past like the headlining at wide receiver, at offensive line. Like this is a rebuilding process. And Jim Harbaugh is going to build it up the way that he's built up all of his successful franchises, like whether it was at Michigan, whether it was with the 49ers, and he did it through the trenches. So I think that it's going to be a longer process. Like, I don't think they're going to immediately try to be like, oh, we got to beat the Chiefs. I mean, no one's been able to do that up to this point. So they do have the good quarterback. They have the franchise quarterback under contract. So they're all set there. But yeah, I think that they're going to go with the offensive line. I think it makes sense that they are a team that's talking about trading down. If they take Latham at 11, that makes a lot more sense than taking him potentially at number 5 overall. And when you look at the way that it's almost poetic in a way, if JJ McCarthy goes 5th overall to the team that Harbaugh makes the trade with. So it's like Harbaugh kind of putting his guy in the best position to succeed. And if I'm Jim Harbaugh, I know that's Minnesota. So Denver, hanging up. The Raiders, I'm hanging up. I'm picking up the phone, especially because those guys play in the AFC West. Like, why would I give my best quarterback to my division rivals? That's not happening. So the only phone that I'm picking up is from Quincy. Like, hey, man, let's make a deal. And that's probably what people are thinking and why money's coming in on JJ at the 5th overall pick.
All right, let's move on to the next pick here, which would be the New York Football Giants. Also, not a good season for the New York Giants. I think we could all agree on that. Some second guessing as opposed about the contract of Daniel Jones. Some camps believe that they are looking to right that wrong, make a change there potentially. Saquon Barkley is now a Philadelphia Eagle, so a little bit of a different scenario there. So, Andrew, we'll start with you with this one here. The Giants, I don't want to say they're in a rock and a hard place, but they're in a situation right now, the New York Giants, where they are kind of stuck, it feels like, with Daniel Jones, at least with this first round. Now, maybe in the second round, they might go out there and try to get a quarterback, potentially, we shall see, and hedge their bets a little bit. But if you were the New York Football Giants and you, let's say, can't make the deal to move up, or you don't want to necessarily move up in order to take a JJ McCarthy, what do you think the Giants will do with this pick if they stay put?
I think they're going to take a wide receiver. I'm not buying any of them really being super interested in the quarterbacks. Now, again, it could come down to price, but I think they're going to stick with Daniel Jones. Like, Daniel Jones got hurt last year. Like, are we just going to write him off because he was injured? Like, he didn't get to play because the offensive line and the lack of supporting cast did not help him. So, and people look at the Patriots as like the worst situation for a rookie quarterback. I mean, the Giants isn't much better in the current state that franchise is in. So I think that they roll back with Daniel Jones. They still have him under contract again. So next year could be a different conversation. It's a little bit easier to get out of the contract, but give Daniel Jones one more shot. Give him an actual wide receiver. Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze. It looks like it's a coin flip decision between those 2 wide receivers. Nabers has been ahead of Odunze throughout most of the process, but there may be that the Giants like the safety of Odunze a little bit more, and he's a little bit different than the current receivers they already have. I would still take Nabers because I just want that explosive upside. Like, I don't care. Like, when I watch Nabers, he reminded me a lot of Stephon Diggs from an explosive standpoint, and the head coach of the Giants is Brian Daboll, who obviously knows Stephon Diggs. So that's what I would do, and I think they're ultimately going to pick a wide receiver here, whether it's Harrison if he falls, if the Arizona Cardinals trade out, or Nabers or Odunze.
So, Thor, in a world where, let's say, Harrison goes, your Vikings take their quarterback and leapfrog with the Chargers, which I know is your dream come true. Let's say all of those scenarios present themselves. What does Malik Nabers look like with Daniel Jones in terms of his early NFL career? What's your take and projectability on that?
He'd be manna from heaven for Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones, the thing we talked about when he came out of Duke, the thing we were concerned about is the throwing downfield stuff. But like, he had the physical package as far as running with the athleticism, and then also could hit guys on the hands, short and intermediate. You do that with Malik Nabers, and he got his step where he can turn upfield. The defense is in a world of hurt. That's what Malik Nabers does. He destroys you with the yak, and then you have to corral him. The movement skills are so special with him. So that's what he would give to the Giants offense and the Daniel Jones. It's an interesting debate between him and Odunze. It for the Giants, I'm talking about from their perspective. Mm-hmm. It's interesting. At the beginning of the process, I was actually pretty bullish that if the Giants took a wide receiver and those were the 2 guys that they were deciding between, that they would side with Odunze, because stylistically, to me, you match them up against that mishmash, crappy receiving core that they have, but they don't, outside of Hodgins, they don't, and Hodgins isn't really a starting caliber receiver, but they don't really have the big dude that can win jump balls downfield. They don't really have that guy, the volume guy. They don't really have any good receivers.
I was going to say, they might not have anybody.
Yeah, a better complement where then the other guys would sort of, fall into their slots and then be more natural. It would seem to be Odunze stylistically. Does not mean that he is better than Nabers. I have Nabers, of course, above on my board. That's why I ended up switching it, and a lot of people were behind the idea of Nabers to the Giants. but it does seem like it is closer to a coin flip than maybe we thought before. There is, I think, still bettable. A lot of these draft props that are out there, I don't think are bettable anymore. The market has zapped a lot of value from them. Odunze to the Giants in the 6 slot is interesting because you can still get that at over 2-1. So that's one to consider if you want to fade sort of the conventional wisdom that they would just default to Nabers there.
All right, let's move on to the next pick here, and it belongs to the Tennessee Titans at 7. They too, like the Giants, were 6-11 last year. They turned the page at the quarterback position, so we'll see how that goes in year 2. But the Tennessee Titans, obviously a team also that's moved on from their head coach. So a lot of changes here. Was Will Levis will hopefully try to lead them into that next phase of what the Tennessee Titans are. Calvin Ridley was brought in here. You also had L'Jarius Sneed acquired here in a trade. Last year, they took Skoronski on the offensive line. That was their first big pick. And then Will Levis obviously slid to them later. Tajay Spears, maybe we'll see more of him in a better situation this year now that Derrick Henry is gone. But obviously the Derrick Henry leaving, we have a whole different quarterback situation. We have a whole different coach situation. Thor Nystrom, the Tennessee Titans are not the same Tennessee Titans that we've seen in the past. So does that make them a little unpredictable potentially here with this pick that they have?
We'll see if I end up eating this tweet, but I think that they are one of the few predictable teams here.
Okay.
Because I feel like they're zeroing in on a tackle. And I think that they want to wait to see, will Joe Alt fall through the wickets before they decide on a potential trade back? They're in an interesting spot where both of their tackles are atrocious. Their entire offensive line isn't very good. Yeah, they have Skoronski. But the issue is that they're saying we're going to give Levis a chance and we're going to see and see if we can build around him. But that's not actually true if they don't use a top 10 pick on a left tackle, because Will Levis's his biggest bugaboo coming out last year, it wasn't his physical package. It wasn't his arm. Those things are awesome. The things that we questioned about Will Levis, it was decision-making under duress. Can he keep his mechanics under duress? Does he sense that blindside pass rusher whatsoever? Like, he would get ragdolled from behind when he was at Kentucky. We saw this over and over again. The pressure thing has been his bugaboo going back to when he began starting at Kentucky. If you don't give him a competent left tackle, you are deciding in advance that we will be moving on from Will Levis after this season. Because of that, I think that Joe Alt is right there on the top of the Titans board. They will turn that card in very quickly if the Chargers, whether a trade down, obviously that's what we've been talking about potentially here. If that ends up happening, a quarterback goes in that 5th slot as opposed to the tackle. You look at the mock drafts over the past couple months, the scenario where the Titans got Alt every time, it was always when the Chargers were the trade down team, right? Because that erases them as the Alt team. So if that ends up happening, that trade goes through to the quarterback team, we'll say the Vikings. They take the quarterback at 5. Joe Alt gets to 7. Titans take Alt. If the Chargers stay, though, and they don't take Latham, the thing we were talking about before, but they do take Joe Alt, that is where I think it gets more interesting with the Titans, because the only 2 other left tackle guys in the first round, I think that you could argue outside of Guyton, but Guyton is he's on the fringes between round 1 and round 2 and more of the project. There's a bigger risk there. And again, if you want to give Will Levis a fair shake for next season, need to upgrade that left tackle spot immediately. The 2 other names outside of Joe Alt that could play left tackle start next season right away would be Fashanu and Fatanu. But Alu Fashanu from Penn State, he's the awesome pass protector. So I think that he has been more in play for the Titans for the 7 slot, maybe than some people were given credit for heading in, because pass protection is his thing. The reason that he is a polarizing prospect is the other part of his game is not very good. He is not a good run blocker. He's an awesome pass blocker who is natural at that. And it is the inverse when he is moving forward, doesn't have the play power. And because of that, what I see is he'll try to lunge into contact, sometimes get a little bit more pop at the contact point, doesn't latch on very well. Sometimes he'll bounce off a guy, let them through, whatever. Does not have a feel for it. Like I said, the technique needs work, and he also needs more play strength there. But the pass pro thing is what the Titans prioritizing on the blind side. Fashanu would be a guy for that. And then Fatanu, with each organization that has considered Troy Fatanu, from Washington, it's what do we see him as? Do we see him as a tackle in the NFL? You know, he's a kid who's a shade under 6'4", but he does have the length. We did see him be really, really good in the Pac-12 as a tackle. And, you know, he has done that stuff, and he showed the athletic traits during the pre-draft process as well. But do you see him as an interior guy, or do you see him as a guy that could hang outside? But I think that's what the Titans are considering. Now, if Alt's off the board, I think it might be Fashanu. Maybe they think they can trade down a little bit, but maybe they don't think that they can.
Speaking of trades, a few different sources right now. Tom Curran, I see on X, and Dov Kleinman right now are both saying that the New England Patriots are in talks with the 49ers regarding Brandon Ayuk. Andrew Erickson, you are a New England fella. What are your thoughts on this potential rumored deal where maybe the Patriots, I don't know what pick it's going to cost them, but could land Brandon Ayuk and maybe some draft capital going back the other way to the 49ers?
I mean, just check the Twitters. Check the tweets, guys. I've been calling the Patriots. I've been counting down the days for Brandon Ayuk to be a Patriot. Like, this is happening. Get excited. Look, Elliott Wolf is working his magic. We saw him do this in Cleveland. Like, he was part of the reason why they acquired Odell Beckham Jr. It didn't work out, but I think it was the right process. He knows that he has to get a number one wide receiver for their future rookie quarterback. Brandon Ayuk, all the guy wants is targets. Come to New England. You can have 200 targets if you want to. You're going to get all the looks that you can deal with. You're going to have plenty of tight ends to compete with, none of which will look anything like George Kittle, and a bunch of slot receivers. Like Brandon Ayuk, you're going to drown. We're going to have to get you a life jacket because of all the targets you're going to be drowning in. So I am super excited for that. I think it's the exact move. Like, again, I want the Patriots to draft a quarterback in this draft. That's to be expected. But for them to land an alpha wide receiver that the 49ers are probably not going to extend anyway, like, this is the move that the Patriots need to make. So I'm thrilled. I really hope it happens. And I'm going to have my, going to get my Ayuk Patriots jersey.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, but certainly some rumblings going on there from some actual credible sources who do cover the NFL. So that's something we're always looking for. No fake accounts posting silly trade rumors out there. Next team on the board is the Atlanta Falcons at 8. They are 7-10 off of last year, but the Atlanta Falcons are a different team right now because they've got a quarterback, and his name is Kirk Cousins. Let's go, boys. Kirk Cousins now takes over an offense that has Kyle Pitts, that has Drake London, that has Bijan Robinson. Those are three incredible weapons. They have a defense, a decent offensive line. It's a lot to like with the Atlanta Falcons. They were my sleeper pick last year for this division, but unfortunately the quarterback play just completely fell apart. They could not get anything out of it. That's going to be different this year. It would not shock me if they were not only a 10-win team, but maybe potentially more in that division that's a little soft. Obviously, last year, their first-round pick was Bijan Robinson. Erickson, let's start with you here. Obviously, they're looking on the defensive side, defensive line, potentially some pass rush there, or some corner help. Where do you think the Falcons would go first here in 2024 in this first round?
So, yeah, definitely agree. Defense makes the most sense. And I think that they could probably get the first defender, even in a trade down scenario. If another team wants to trade up for quarterback, receiver, offensive tackle, Atlanta could trade back and still get the number one defender off the board. For me, I think they're going to go with Byron Murphy, defensive tackle out of Texas. When you look at Raheem Morris and his track record when he was a former head coach with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, the most capital that he ever invested was defensive tackle. Like, that's what he's invested the most into his defense, coming from the Rams that valued interior pass rush, Aaron Donald. Like, that's what makes this defense tick. Raheem Morris, like, I really think it's going to be Byron Murphy. I was never really buying into the Dallas Turner locked and loaded every single mock draft. Dallas Turner 8 overall. I don't think it's going to be Dallas Turner. I just never really thought that he was the generational edge rusher that was deserving to be the number one defensive player versus like a Latu or even Jared Verse. But Byron Murphy, I mean, look at who got paid this offseason. Defensive tackles and offensive guards, because that interior pass rush is where games are being won in the trenches, not necessarily as much on the outside with edge and tackles. So that's where the market's going. So I think that teams are valuing defensive tackles higher because, especially in this draft, there's not that many of them. There are more edge rushers like a Dallas Turner, Chop Robinson, Verse, Latu, but there's Byron Murphy, Jaron Newton, and then Darius Robinson, but that's it. So I think that they could kind of shock some people and go Byron Murphy from Texas.
All right, Thor, do you agree with Andrew's assessment here that Murphy might be the guy?
Very much in play. And if it's not the Falcons, the Bears are sitting right there, and very well might pop him right after that. The odds on Byron Murphy down the stretch here have shrunk in every capacity, every prop that you track. First defensive lineman off the board, first defender off the board. And then for those two slots in particular, of course, because that would be the first defender that was taken, as well. But yeah, certainly a position of need for both teams. And the other thing to consider there, because this might surprise some people if Murphy goes 8 or 9, depending on how close they've been following the news here over the past 4 or 5 days. But one thing to contextually keep in mind, you have to keep in mind with when someone makes a pick, no selection is made in a vacuum. You have to consider the positional buckets as well and the tiers and how quickly does it drop off. The interior defensive line class drops off way, way quicker, in my opinion, than a couple of those other defensive positions where you could more easily project to get a guy who could come in and play early later on. Byron Murphy stands alone in the interior defensive line class. It's like Byron Murphy, then a tier drop after that, then Johnny Newton, then another tier drop, and then we can start talking about some of those other guys. People have different, opinions on that. I do as well. But that's also that thing going on there could also end up propelling Byron Murphy to be either the first or the second defender off of the board.
We are now 15 minutes away, hopefully, from the kickoff of the draft, which, of course, doesn't mean we're getting a pick right away. There's going to be a lot of pomp and a lot of circumstance, which is why it's way more fun to be watching us here at Fantasy Pros. So make sure you're using us even during the draft. If you're watching us right now, we're your second screen experience. You can have the draft on live, have us on your device, on your iPad, whatever you might have. But stay with us all throughout the draft as we break down the picks and break down the selections here, because the NFL draft right now is less than a half hour away probably from that first pick. And we have a lot to break down, a lot to get to here. Let's get to the next team on the board here. We just did the Atlanta Falcons. Let's go back to the Bears. So, Thor, with the Bears obviously being locked in at 1, obviously looking at Caleb Williams. Where do they go here with this number 2 pick? The Bears were a team last year that did play better in the second half. They made the adjustment there. They moved on from Justin Fields. Fields is no longer with them. So now it's a matter of what does it look like going forward here for this next pick for the Chicago Bears, in your opinion? Where do they go? Do they stay on the offensive side? If Odunze should drop to them, is that where they go? Or do they go the defensive side after they've already selected the quarterback?
For the longest time this spring when we did the mocks, I would slot Odunze in here because it's like Thanos with I don't know all the terms, when he puts
the
all
gauntlet, the Infinity Gauntlet is what you're looking for. Yes,
I mean I come from that universe, so you'd think I'd know the vernacular.
You would think the guy named Thor would somehow get the Avengers reference correct, but no.
I did kill Thanos one time in one of those movies.
Well, you didn't aim for the head.
Sent me that script.
Time,
I was I'm down for that.
It was you and Hemsworth. That's it. They had both of you in the room. It was very close. You both took your shirts off, and they still liked you better, but they thought Hemsworth was a better actor. At the end of the day, that's the way they were.
That is true. Yeah, they were like Thor. Thor has him on physique, the real Thor.
Totally
and they're like Hemsworth though. I did a little bit more acting classes.
Yeah,
that's why
classical
he got
training pays off.
Decision there. But so I thought it was Odunze for a while. Just not any information, but just the best prospect at what I perceive to be a position in need, because Tyler Scott is the third one. I know that the Bears have done a good job adding DJ Moore last offseason. You got Keenan Allen this offseason. But how fun would it be to get one more stud boundary receiver? But the thing, and what we'll end up seeing here in a little bit, but the things that I was hearing over the past week is that the Bears are focusing more on defense, and or if a scenario presents itself to them as the bullets are flying tonight to move out of this slot. I think that's at least from what I've been hearing. We mentioned Byron Murphy just a second ago. If Atlanta doesn't take him, or if Atlanta makes a trade down a little bit, another team's up there obviously maybe wouldn't be targeting Byron Murphy. I think that there's a decent shot that Byron Murphy goes in this slot. Edge is another big position of need for the Bears. I think that they would be looking to fortify their defensive front one way or the other if they stay in that slot.
Now, I know it's a loaded question, Erickson, to ask you, because as a fantasy person, of course, you always want the fantasy asset, right? So do you think that they would go wide receiver, or do you think it would be a better football decision to go on the defensive side of this board and continue to build this team with a little bit more balance, which is right now, I think, a very open for business division? You know, you certainly had the Detroit Lions were great last year. You had the Green Bay Packers, a very young team. They got into the playoffs. They made some noise there. But with the Minnesota Vikings making that move at quarterback, and who knows what the quarterback of the future is going to look like there, maybe the Bears are more competitive potentially in that division.
I think for me, it makes sense that they would go defensive to kind of balance out, what they struggled with last year. But I mean, I just want them to keep loading up with offense. Like as a fantasy guy, like you're right. It's like you read me like an open book, Joe. You're like, oh, you're a fantasy guy. Like you're the one it's the fantasy guys that are putting all these wide receivers in all the mock drafts because not all these teams are going to draft receivers. So yeah, I mean, at first, like when I started seeing Odunze and even like Brock Bowers like linked to the Chicago Bears, I'm like, guys, like why are we doing this? Like we don't need we got Keenan Allen, we got DJ Moore, but when you kind of like take a step back, you're like, well, Keenan Allen's like on the wrong side of 30. Like he's not getting younger. Like how much long-term is he there? DJ Moore is obviously a anchor piece, but as we've learned in this league, like you need multiple weapons. Like even Cole Kmet, like it seems like he's in a good spot, but it's like, could they continue to load up? I wouldn't even be surprised if they don't do the defensive side and they actually go offensive tackle. Like just looking to upgrade and protect Caleb Williams that way with a better supporting cast. Like they have 2 tackles in place right now, the guy they drafted last year and Braxton Jones. But I mean, if you can get a top tier offensive tackle prospect, I think that player like a Fashanu like has a much higher ceiling than a guy like Braxton Jones. So I think that the Bears are just really in a really good spot. Like Thor mentioned before, they could trade down and still probably get one of their top targets. I mean, look, they're in the driver's seat to just come out of this draft. I mean, they're going to get their franchise quarterback, and then they're going to get a really good player, a top 10 talent potentially as well at any position that they want. So that they can they're in a position to let the board kind of fall to them, and they can just kind of take best player available. And if it's one of these weapons, I think they should take it. But if the best defender in the draft is available to them, then it's hard to argue with that.
Dialing back to that first pick overall for them with the Caleb Williams selection seems to be all but locked in. He's going to have Keenan Allen, great veteran presence. He's going to have DJ Moore, who was very effective last year and has been very steady throughout his career with subpar quarterback play. What would be your expectations for Caleb Williams from a fantasy standpoint that first year? Because they have never in the history of this organization had a quarterback throw for 4,000 yards, which seems stunning even in the last 10 years of the NFL. But not Jay Cutler, not Jim McMahon, not Kyle Orton, not Randy Orton, not anybody. Forget it. They haven't had anybody throw for that sort of yardage total. I know it's tough with the winds down there by the river, but at the same point in time, Erickson, something's got to give here. Do you think Caleb Williams could be that guy to change the Bears offense finally into something that's a little bit more modern day?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they brought in Shane Waldron for a reason. He has a connection with Caleb Williams. So, and the 4,000 yard passing thing, that definitely bothers the Bears organization. Like the fact that like a number that's not, like that's not a astronomical number where like, I mean, they never had a 5,000 yard pass. Like, okay, like that's a hard number to get to. Like, okay, 4,000 yards. When the NFL has been pass happy for the past 25 years, the Bears still haven't been able to do that. So yeah, I think they're going to keep that in mind. I think they're going to keep the pedal to the metal, especially as we get towards the later weeks of the season and Caleb Williams is closing in on that 4K mark. They're going to be like, we're going to throw it. Like we need to make sure we get this guy over the hump and get over that yardage mark. So I think that he's just set up much better than any other first round quarterback usually is. Again, those teams are drafting at the bottom for a reason, but the Bears are the rare case where they have the number 1 overall pick because of smart trading. Like they were able to acquire it from the Carolina Panthers, who are just in a really, really bad situation now. And it's funny to like ask this question, but if Carolina had kept their pick, would they also be drafting Caleb Williams 101 tonight with Bryce Young either on their roster or traded? Probably.
That's an interesting conundrum there. If that were the case, Thor Nystrom, what do you think the Panthers would have been doing, living in an alternate universe?
I almost don't even want to answer this because Panther fans are like, I'm shutting the TV off. Maybe they're not even, they're going to wait till tomorrow anyway. It's a tough scene. But yeah, they alternate universe, they would go back in 1 second. snap the fingers and go back a year, obviously redo that thing. Never thought that they would have the worst record in the NFL. That be the Caleb Williams pick. I think that's why their owner was throwing the drinks out of his luxury box, and some frustration in the building this year. But they've started to do stuff to give Bryce Young some help. They finally got someone on their receiving core that can get open, and maybe when the Panthers come up first pick of the second round, they can get a second one.
All right, let's take a look here at the New York Jets at 10. And then we're going to go through Erickson's best bets here as we're getting closer and closer to NFL Draft, see what he's in on. Remember, the stream is brought to you by Betting Pros. Download the Betting Pros app whenever you can while you're watching the stream. It's simple, it's easy, it's fun, and let us help you with the best tools on the planet for all of your wagering. So make sure if you haven't already, check it out. Again, it's free. You can always upgrade to the premium version, but if you're looking for the best lines, the best houses, this is the way to do it. We have all the breakdowns for you. It is easy to use. It is effective. It is, simply put, the best set of tools possible out there for your wagering needs. So if you're somebody who's been wagering for a long time, it's going to help you. If you're somebody brand new to wagering, it's going to help you. So check out the Betting Pros app. Download that bad boy today. And remember, the stream is brought to you by Betting Pros. We also have our YouTube channel as well, our Betting Pros YouTube channel. You can subscribe to that and subscribe right here. And if you're enjoying the stream, like the darn thing, because it's literally the least thing you could do. It's so easy to do. Like the stream. We're going to be coming up here pretty soon at 8 o'clock. Some fun things here ahead of us, including the NFL Draft actually starting and picks actually being made. Unbelievable. Let's get to the New York Jets at 10. What do the New York Jets need? Well, they need Aaron Rodgers to play more than a series. That would probably be number one on this list. They need an offensive coordinator, but I digress. The defense is there. The running back is there. The quarterback play, obviously, is the huge glaring problem. So in theory, Aaron Rodgers comes back healthy, all is quote-unquote right with the world. That being said, Thor, where do you think the Jets end up going here with this pick, especially if there is some movement here in this draft and someone does trade up here to take a Brock Bowers perhaps ahead of them? If that scenario presents itself to them, and Bowers, let's say, wasn't on the board, and Odunze wasn't on the board because everybody gets so hungry for these big offensive players and they have a clear drop-off after that, well, then where would the Jets end up?
Yeah, I think I know what they want to do, what the first option is for them. I think their first preference is that Rome Odunze somehow filters down the board. That would be the bonanza outcome for them, that he gets down to 10. And I think that they will explore a trade up of 2 slots or 1 slot once, if that's in play, of course, and he's there. See if you can consummate that. But of course, the Falcons and Bears, we've discussed, possibility at least. We all think that those teams are leaning towards defenders, which is one way they potentially, a guy like Odunze could get down to the number 10 slot. If not Odunze, Bowers obviously is very much in play here. We talked about that earlier in the show and Erickson's trepidations of that. But I do think that he's in play here. Of course, he was seen as the favorite against the rest of the market. That might be a bit overstating it, particularly with the circumstance how that board goes, because they're taking Odunze over Bowers if they're both there. I'm just telling you right now. But I do think that Bowers would be in play if Odunze is gone. And the offensive line is something that they keep talking about. They did patch the couple holes only for the short term. They're guys that, in a year, you're still going to have the starting lineup holes there. And you also have no depth right now. So the offensive line is really something that you could consider. For me, I think obviously Odunze, but they are the Jets are a potential trade down team as well. If the positional buckets that they like are still pretty stocked at that point, they're going to listen to calls.
Interesting, because Thor, your comp for Odunze was Davante Adams, if memory serves. Mm-hmm. Now, doesn't that sound like somebody, Andrew Erickson, that Aaron Rodgers would enjoy throwing the football to?
I do. I love that comp that Thor gave for Odunze. I thought the same thing.
Wow. That's pretty high praise. So your other comp for Malik Nabers was Odell Beckham. Now, I know it's, we're talking about comps here and styles and things like that, but Davante Adams, I think we can certainly argue, has had the better career. Is there a world, Thor, where Odunze is the guy that has the better career over Malik Nabers, who might go ahead of him?
Yeah, well, and just speaking to that, Aaron Rodgers was able to convince all his former lesser talented Green Bay Packer receivers to come over. He got the Randall Cobb, he got the Allen Lazard, the whole thing, and then he's like, well, what about the good one? And they're like, well, we can't trade for Devontae because they won't trade him to us. And so now Rodgers he's watching tape of these receivers, and he's like, I know a guy that kind of plays like him. Go and get me that guy. But yeah, for sure. All three of those receivers, again, we talk about it again, but it's not an exaggeration. All those guys are next level prospects. Rome Odunze had a chance to declare for last year's draft. Had he done that, he would have been a first round pick that was in that. He would have fallen within that run of receivers that we had starting at 20. However, keep in mind, Rome Odunze, his game went to the next level this year. He took a huge step up. So this is a different Rome Odunze than last year. Last year's Rome Odunze would have had a shot at wide receiver one. I don't know if he would have gotten there. There was some more questions about his game. Like I said, wasn't quite as productive. In 2022, him and Jalen McMillan were basically sharing targets there, as the 1A, 1B. But this year, Rome Odunze was so dominant. Yeah, depending on the landing spot for any of those three guys, the guy that gets in the most advantageous one, certainly early on in his career during the rookie contract, could have that be the leader in the clubhouse to have the best stats during that time.
Well, about 20 minutes ago, Ian Rappaport tweeted that Rome Odunze is actually the target of some trade-up news. So we'll keep an eye on that. So that should be a very exciting thing here. So obviously lots of moving pieces here. Andrew Erickson, we are going to bid you adieu here. And Andrew is going to be back with us a little later in the show because we've got to bring in another member of our esteemed crew here at Fantasy Pros. Before we do, just a quick reminder here as well, the FFPC is here for you already. What is that? If you don't know, it's the Fantasy Pros Championship, and the drafts are both fast and slow, and they're already live. It's a $350 entry fee. You can go to fantasypros.com/FFPC. Use that promo code FANTASYPROS on sign up, and you get $25 off your first entry. There's $1 million going in first prize and the world's largest online season-long tournament. The early bird discount right now, if you register by June 15th and draft your team by June 30th, you receive a team credit there for $35. So you get that $25 with that $35. Use that promo code FANTASYPROS, and you could be the Fantasy Pros champion right now. FFPC tournaments were extremely popular last year. I did not win last year. Derek Brown did not win, so now he is stuck here with me. But if Derek Brown did win the $1 million, I think probably there would be signs of that. That would be my guess. And some of those signs would probably be maybe the way Derek Brown dresses. D-Bro, Derek Brown, the king of bros here, getting fancy for draft night. He is business in the front, party up top. He is all things. Derek Brown, it's good to see you, buddy. It's draft night. I'm very excited to be here. Now, usually you're with the big giant hat, but today you went full Lincoln on us. A little, hopefully it turns out better for you than it did for him. That's what I'm hoping.
I mean, I was trying for the wig. I was thinking about going Benjamin Franklin, but Lincoln feels very, very appropriate. I mean, that or the Monopoly Man. What do you think, Joe? I mean, do not pass go.
Would have been a nice touch.
You told me about that. I thought about it.
I did suggest the monocle, but Derek Brown, we haven't really gotten to get your take on things here. Obviously, some rumors are flying around, but right now what we have is the first few picks, which seems like it's going to be Caleb Williams at the top. That seems to be the lock. We seem to be looking at Jayden Daniels at 2. And then number 3 seems open for business. Do you think the Patriots stay there? Who do you think they take a quarterback if they do stay put at 3, D-Bro? What's your take on this and prediction?
I think the Patriots probably stick and pick, and if they do that, I think it's Drake Maye, because Thor and I have talked a ton on the Fantasy Pros NFL Draft Show about Drake Maye is probably a quarterback that needs to sit some time. Now, the question is how long, but you have a guy in Jacoby Brissett, like last year we saw in relief of Sam Howell at the end of the year, he's still got the magic, man. Like, he could still be that Geno Smith guy that can come in, play, and start. Hell, he could start the entire year if they needed him to and do it well. So I think that if you're looking at New England, I think Drake Maye is probably the fit. I think it's a fantastic fit. I don't see them trading out because I just don't know if a team is going to give them enough to say, okay, bypass your future quarterback, considering as well if we're trying to look into the future here and say, what does the quarterback class next year look like? Is it good enough for them to move off the pick? And I just don't see it happening.
All right. So you are a Maye over McCarthy guy. Is that where you have the ranks?
I am a McCarthy over Maye guy.
You're a
McCarthy has
over
been
Maye
my
guy.
Yep, he's been my QB2 the entire time.
Okay, so you and Thor obviously have been hanging out a lot. We know that. So is that the reason why? Or what's your breakdown and the reasoning between those two? Because we already got Thor's earlier in the show.
Yeah, I mean, my breakdown of it is I think JJ has a very similar ceiling to Drake Maye, and I think the floor is even higher. I think he comes in as a more polished prospect. You want to talk about mechanics, you want to talk about off-script ability, and everybody loves, that's one of the first things, if it's not the big arm for Drake Maye that people talk about first, it's the off-script ability. And I'm like, if you turn on the film, you can make a really easy conversation, a really easy argument that JJ McCarthy's off-script ability supersedes Drake Maye's. And I know people are going to hate that take. It's probably going to get clipped and put on social, but I don't care. I've been there. I'm still there.
I like our different versions of getting dressed up today for the draft. I'm enjoying this.
I was told to get dressed up. I mean, I did. I got the bow tie.
Let's all get, fancy for the draft. So Thor put on his best flannel and you did whatever this is. So God knows what night 2 is going to be, but we're going to be here for night 2, not just tonight, folks. So as you're getting excited for the NFL draft, which is going to give us the first pick probably in the next 15, 20 minutes or so, this always makes me laugh, as if somehow we have to wait for them to be on the clock, but we just can't start the draft with the first pick. Wouldn't that be nice? We have to put them on the official clock. They've only had, 6 months to figure this out, but that's all right. Never mind. It's fine. Well, not 6, 4 months anyway. So we will be live tomorrow on our channel here again, 6 p.m. Eastern, a little bit earlier start tomorrow. So don't forget, night 2 of the NFL draft. We will be here live and a lot more fantasy picks to be made there. A lot of the running backs you'll see go there, a lot of wide receivers. D-Bro, as we continue to bring you on here to get your take on things, what does that day 2 look like for you in terms of the depth of the wide receiver class and this running back class? Because the RB class has taken a lot of hits here in, I think, the public domain, that it's not a great class. Do you agree with that statement, or do you think there's some gems there to be had?
I've been higher on the running back class than a lot of people. And
okay.
Am I telling you that it's 10 to 12 deep? No. Am I telling you there's a first round talent in this running back class? No. Are there guys that have third round grades? Yes. Are there guys that can be starters? I think the top 4 running backs in this class, talking about my guy Marshawn Lloyd, Jalen Wright, Jonathan Brooks, and Trey Benson, do they all have starter level qualities, and can they be starters in the NFL? Yes, absolutely. So I'm not telling you that the running back class, and especially if you want to go even further down the trough, and we want to talk about Blake Corum, can he be an early down part of a committee? Kamani Vidal, I know Thor, his ears are going to perk up when I say that name, but I think there is more talent in the running back class than people are giving it credit for. I'm not over the moon and telling anybody that any of these running backs need to be going in round 2 or round 1 of the NFL draft. But I'm not alone in that. I mean, hell, we just saw Daniel Jeremiah put out his final mock in his top 150, and Marshawn Lloyd landed as a top 60 player. And for everybody at home, that's a second-round grade, people. So I'm not alone in this.
No, you're not alone, just in that choice of fashion. That's the only place where you're potentially alone, Derek. But Joe, that's okay. It's better to be fashion forward, I always say.
Excuse me. I'm not going to sit here and take all this fashion slander, okay? You look like you're trying to sell condos when you're not hosting, okay?
Hey, look, I've got a timeshare for you and your family that's going to blow your mind. The opportunities for this timeshare are once in a lifetime. The problem is every time I get dressed up or wear a jacket or tie or anything like that, I automatically like an extra from Goodfellas. And it's just... there's nothing I can do about it.
That's exactly what I told the chat. I told him you look like it's a cross between real estate agent and Goodfellas right now.
Well, real estate agent, I got to do the whole Eric Cartman thing where I've got to fold my arms. And why does everyone have to take pictures like that with the real estate thing? That's really what it's all about. Just taking the pictures, solid picture. Thor, there's going to be a lot of real estate moving here. If you had to put your money on a trade here, because everything's been so quiet, I feel like, and that is almost a very dangerous thing. A couple years ago, we had some crazy amount of trades in the second and third round. Things went absolutely bananas. What do you think happens tonight? And who's the team that shakes things up? Is it the Denver Broncos trading out? Is it somebody moving heaven and earth to potentially move up? Is it your Minnesota Vikings as you're hoping? What's your prediction here on draft night?
We're going to have a ton of trades tonight. The big ones, I think you have the obvious one of the quarterback team moving up for QB4, presumably the Vikings. That there has also been a lot of smoke here heading like earlier today, heading up to when we went live, that there is could be some shocking trades in the works. One of them was that a rumor that is out there is that the Rams are working the phone lines hard to try to get a top 10 pick. So I think we could also, we're going to see some of the trades that we have projected in mock drafts all spring. But I also think we're going to get, we could get at least one in the top 10 that is totally outside the lines of anything that we have considered or seen in any mock draft exercise.
Well, that would be perfect, right? Because then it would blow up everybody's mock drafts. D-Bro, what's your prediction here for a trade? Obviously, we already know that Brandon Ayuk has been floated around, but that doesn't probably move anyone out of the first round. What do you think happens here in terms of the team that makes a big splash?
Ooh, so there's been a lot of rumors, and I think it's real, that Indianapolis could try to make a big move up for one of these wide receivers. The name that has been out there as far as the buzz goes has been Marvin Harrison Jr. I don't know if they can get up there, but I mean, could they get Rome Odunze? Like, all they have to do is probably get inside the top 10 to get Rome Odunze. If it's not Indy coming up for a wide receiver, the trade that I need in my life, Joey, the one that I need, like, down to my bones, I want the Buffalo Bills to come trade up for Rome Odunze. I've been out here saying it. That's the one that I want to see.
What does that trade look like? That's got to look like a fair amount here, because there's a little bit of a desperation
question
when it comes to
Thor.
Bills.
I know you got the trade calculator.
Well, yeah, Thor, get out your calculator for us. What does that look like if the Buffalo Bills kind of move all the way up there to make that sort of a move? It would obviously cost them their first round, but what else?
Let me, I'll run the equations right now as you guys.
Okay, well, you run the equations. Let's take a look at the number one overall picks for the last 10 years. You would think that, well, if you have the number one overall pick, you're just drafting Hall of Famers over and over and over again. It's a very simple task. However, since 1983, there's only been a handful. Only 5 guys have gone to the Hall of Fame, and Peyton Manning obviously did not go number one overall, so you can't even say him and say, well, he's the next one, because it was Ryan Leaf. So once again, organizations don't always make the best decisions. It's kind of stunning when you think about that so many number one overall picks, the entire board, yet in the last 25 years or even 30-something years now, we're looking at almost 40, only 5 Hall of Famers. D-Bro, that seems a little shocking. But look, last year, Bryce Young, obviously a rough start to his career. Trayvon Walker, that did not, it's been, I guess, early a little bit to really get into that one. Trevor Lawrence, I think, has been a bad victim of circumstance, went into a terrible situation in Jacksonville, got a little bit better, a little regression last year. Joe Burrow, I think, again, we could just get an offensive line there, but the guy's gone to a Super Bowl. He's beaten the Chiefs, so already a good trajectory for him. Kyler Murray in 2019, Baker Mayfield, it took him a couple teams, but it looks like he's finally figured things out here and found a home in Tampa. Myles Garrett, that's a pretty good pick right there. Mm-hmm. Take the big nasty boy to kill quarterbacks, and I think you're going to do pretty well. So Myles Garrett's been fantastic for the Browns, a team that has whiffed on quite a few picks in the past. Jared Goff, well, again, it's taken some time, but he has played in a Super Bowl, and now he is the quarterback responsible for getting the Detroit Lions back into relevancy and into the playoffs. Jameis Winston, can't say quite the same thing about him, and Jadeveon Clowney in 2014. So, D-Bro, when you take a look at all of these number one overall picks from the last 10 years, it is a little bit of a checkered board.
It is. And looking at all the different types of quarterbacks, because we could talk about even the archetypes of all those quarterbacks going number one. I think it's a very interesting group of quarterbacks. And I mean, come on, Joe, let's mind's eye this. Do you see anybody out of that group making it into the Hall of Fame? Like outside of Joe Burrow, because he's the easy answer. Who, if you were going to project this forward and say, okay, 10, 15 years, we'll give him a long career. 10, 15 years into the future, any one of these guys, who are you going to put your money with that they make the Hall of Fame?
Well, Joe Burrow, I think, is the best shot, obviously, but I'm not ready to give up on Trevor Lawrence.
That's the low-hanging fruit.
It is the low-hanging fruit, but I want to stick up for other Joes, because that's our job. We have a whole team of people here working.
It's a coalition? Do y'all meet on
Tuesdays? A coalition of
Tuesdays?
Joes. We have a whole thing going on here. But I'm not ready to give up on Trevor Lawrence yet. I mean, he was the prototype. He was the can't miss. I just think Jacksonville's been a terrible situation for him. So I'm not ready to quite go there, but that would be my guess. That's where I would go. Thor, what's your answer to that question? Because it is a good one that Derek Brown is posing there.
Well, thank you for buying me the filibuster time. I have an answer on the
I know math is not your first, choice.
Yeah, and it's a Tetris thing. You got to find the right iteration. If you're going up to 9, is that where we were thinking beating the Jets to the punch for Odunze?
Yeah, let's do that.
So if the one that gets close to jiving it would be 20. So we're talking the Bills offering this to the Bears, 28, 60, the Bills' second round pick, and then their third round pick next year for number 9 is a little overage on the trade chart. They would probably have to give a little bit more as well, because you have to convince the Bears now to move down. But keep in mind, the Bears actually are in a scenario where they actually might be one team that would consider moving this far back, because they do have the first pick, of course, a guy who is about to be selected officially here. And then they have this 9th pick. But outside of that, they only have 2 picks the rest of the entire draft right now. So I have expected 75 and 122 I'm referring to. Only other 2 picks for the Bears currently. That's why I've anticipated that there will be a trade down at some point, whether that's from the 9 slot, whether that's from the 75 slot, so you can flesh out your pick allocation and get it closer to that 6-7 of a standard draft class.
Caleb Williams right now with about 8 minutes on the clock for the Bears. Looks like a very happy man. I'm sure he is. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of zeros in the contract that he is going to sign with the Chicago Bears. So we are less than 8 minutes away from that pick being official. Again, God forbid we get it in early just once where we could just have the pick and start the draft. But Caleb Williams looks to be that first selection for the Chicago Bears, and they're going to hopefully find their franchise quarterback, and he will be on this year's board next year when we look back at the 10 years, and hopefully we'll have good things to say about Caleb Williams. Derek, let's get your take on Williams too, because we haven't quite talked too much about him yet with you. This is a player going into, I think, a good circumstance. I don't want to say great, but good. You have some veteran leadership at the wide receiver position. That's important. You have depth at the running back position. That's very important. The Chicago Bears did make strides last year. The question is, are they set up for Caleb Williams to be a success immediately?
I think the easy answer is yes, but what I want to see Chicago accomplish with this draft is, one, like Thor was mentioning, the move down. I want them to move down because there are 2 or 3 glaring spots on this team, this roster, just in general, that I think they could patch and help Caleb here. Not only giving him a better defense, and maybe they pick up an edge. If they were to trade down, they could pick up a second-round pick up another, a later pick in the first round. Do they go edge? The other part that we need to talk about, so a better defense surrounding, or at least backing Caleb Williams, put him in more positive game scripts. He's not going to have to play catch-up. I think that's important, as well as for all the parts or pieces that Chicago has added this offseason and trying to improve this roster, this offensive line is still not perfect. It's still not amazing. Now, yes, you could talk yourself into Braxton Jones. Was a fantastic pick. They've gotten a lot of value out of that. Tevin Jenkins has played good since they moved him to guard, and what this offensive line could be. But this is also a team that you're telling me if they were to draft an offensive tackle or a guard to play and take the starting spot away from Nate Davis, who was, I'll be kind and say he struggled last year. These are the moves that Chicago needs to make to fortify this roster and this depth chart for Caleb Williams. And I think that they need to trade down to sit here and add to this offensive line because he needs time. And if you're talking about a quarterback coming from college and everybody talks about the off-script ability and what he can do when the play breaks down, we also have to mention, and Thor's talked about this on the draft show, is what are you going to ask and what does it look like for Caleb Williams to play on time, to play inside the pocket and things like that? And for him to be more comfortable in doing so, they need to get better blocking up front.
Thor, here's a question. It might not be a matter of talent, maybe just a matter of consistency. Is that fair in terms of the only knock you can really make on Caleb Williams?
It would be, as far as the projection to the next level is, can he throw over the middle of the anticipatory timing type concepts? That's something that we just never saw. Lincoln Riley did not have that in his systems for Caleb Williams at Oklahoma, second half of that true freshman season, and then the past couple of years at USC. It was basically either screen pass right away, or it was the scramble around Caleb create, we didn't see as much of that a particular NFL concept of beating the defense over the middle with that timing concept, or hitting the guy on the hands as he's coming out of the route break, turns around, the ball's on his hands. Didn't see quite as much of that stuff with Caleb Williams. Just wasn't an element of their offense quite as much. That's the thing that he is going to have to work on when he goes to Chicago, gets into their building. The rest of it is there. He becomes much, much harder to defend when the defense knows that he doesn't just have those two things. Like if they know he's scrambling around every single time, obviously you become much easier to defend. Pat Mahomes is an example of a guy who improved greatly at this stuff early on in his NFL career. And then also the discretionary aspect of it, of when the defense is playing this way, if we're going to keep the two deep safety, fine. I'll just beat you underneath the entire time. I'll just beat you with paper cuts instead of the explosive plays. That's the stuff that you need to teach Caleb early on, but the tools with Caleb are just so good.
All right, your comp for Caleb Williams was Aaron Rodgers. Why?
So that's the Bonanza comp. I think for him, the Bonanza outcome, the middle of the road one, I think is Kyler Murray. And I think that there's similarities there if it just sort of goes like that. But if Caleb Williams tremendously improves at for instance, the intermediate timing thing, anticipatory throws, and the creative aspect of his game translates 1-to-1 to the NFL, that's where you see Aaron Rodgers. He has the juice in his arm that maybe not quite to that degree, but he's also more athletic, right? And it's the same thing of that creative bent to their game. And last year with Caleb Williams at USC, they had the poor offensive line. Jordan Addison had just gone to the NFL. So his weapons weren't quite as good as the year before. And that element of his game of just scrambling around, the defense both knew what was coming, but they also had that sieve of an offensive line. That's where he played down. You can keep defenses off of that from sitting dead red on that aspect of your game when you start beating them with the stuff over the middle. You also get the spacing where you force the defense to have to defend that. And then you can start attacking down the field like Caleb Williams loves to do. But those are things that he needs to work on if he was going to become hit that ceiling and become the Aaron Rodgers. But otherwise, if there's still he can get there, but there's still struggles with that. That's where I would see more Kyler.
The pick is in. Caleb Williams is now officially a Chicago Bear. So let all the speculation begin. Let's turn right to fantasy right now. So Derek Brown, where would he be on your board? I don't think he'll be in the top 12 QBs. Am I correct in that assumption? We're looking at more super flex style for Caleb Williams in year one. But what does that look like in terms of draft rank, immediate impact? You had a lot of time, obviously, to think. And Caleb Williams is very excited. The young man takes the podium, hugs Roger Goodell, takes the jersey, takes the hat. Of course, you still have the best hat of the night, no matter what anybody tells you, Derek Brown.
Well, first of all, I'm glad Roger's feeling good enough with the news earlier today of the back surgery that it feels good enough to give Caleb a nice little squeeze there. But as far as the redraft appeal, I've got Caleb Williams right now in my early ranks at QB 17. And I think the case for him starts anywhere from QB 13 on down. And I've got him in a long tier of guys where they're QB2s, but can they be QB1s depending on the season? I mean, we're talking about like Kirk Cousins, Jared Goff, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, like all these different guys. Like it depends on the passing volume, what happens with the passing touchdowns, if Caleb runs a little bit, because we saw that in college. And so I like Caleb Williams. I think like you hit the nail on the head there, Joey. Like Superflex, I think he's much more viable. I'm willing to take a swing on him in Superflex, maybe more aggressively, because in redraft, he's probably not going to be drafted in a lot of spots for redraft. I mean, okay, maybe your 12, 14 teamers, maybe somebody takes a shot in the later
taking
rounds.
A second quarterback, I could see that. Maybe things go well as this season goes on. Thor, now that the pick is officially in there, do you have a projection in terms of stat line for Caleb Williams that you think is reasonable in year one with the weapons and with that offense that they have in tow?
He's gonna be a very good fantasy player, and one thing that I would tell people is that athleticism that he uses to create, he is looking to be the thrower, and so that's how he leverages it between the 20s or between the 10s. But once he gets down near the goal line, I think this is where fantasy players' ears should perk up. There's an interesting quirk about Caleb Williams' game, which is in that area within the 10 yards in particular, but within 5 even more. That element of his game of getting outside the pocket and how comfortable he is in conjunction with never throwing interceptions. Like, he only threw 14 career interceptions over 1,099 career attempts in college. The thing he needs to work on is more carrying the ball like a loaf of bread, and then the guy comes from behind and slaps it. But the interception, the decision making that he makes with that is very good. The way it manifests near the goal line is he'll get out there on the perimeter, be looking, and you're terrified because he can just dart that laser, and it's in the guy's hands in a millisecond. There's no way you're going to be able to get around him. So everyone has to play their coverage assignments very, very tightly. Well, if Caleb doesn't like it and he's out there, he just walks right in or runs right in. He ran for 27 touchdowns over 2.5 seasons as a starter and was tremendous in the red zone. But like I said, even more so within 10 yards because of this. He doesn't make the mistakes, and he is absolutely willing to run it in himself. That will begin to do a jukebox effect or a slot machine effect with fantasy points in the NFL, because he's going to steal some of those close touchdowns from his receivers.
Caleb Williams already, the pick is in, 3,600 passing yards last year, 30 touchdowns, 11 rushing touchdowns. And look, it's not just the wide receivers, Derek Brown. He's also got Cole Kmet. He's got DeAndre Swift. There's a lot to work with here in Chicago for him. So the ceiling is potentially there for him to finish as a QB1. Is that correct? Probably maybe sneak in the 10, 11, 12 range potentially in year one.
Yeah, I think he could be QB8 to QB12. I've got a really good question for you, Joey.
Yes.
Does Caleb Williams in his rookie season set the Chicago Bears single season passing record? Because I just had to look it up. 3,838 passing yards by Eric Kramer holding the record. Does he set that record this year? Because I think he does.
I think it's in the, as you like to say, Derek Brown, the range of outcomes. The 30 touchdowns, which, by the way, also no one's ever done that either for the Chicago Bears. It's just stunning. I think both are in the range of outcomes. I think both fall a little bit short. I don't think he might get over that Kramer mark, but I don't know if he's going to get to the 4K mark. I think somewhere in between that would be reasonable. But I mean, he's got the wide receivers to get there. I think he's also one of those players, I would also imagine, Derek, that camp is going to matter. If he looks really good in camp and everything looks really strong in preseason, like, you don't take a lot out of preseason. When you're seeing like a rookie quarterback take over for a franchise and he's comfortable in the offense and he's comfortable with the, moving the pieces around, and he looks like he's got command of not just the pocket, but command in the huddle, I think that goes a long way to my confidence in Caleb Williams, even in single quarterback leagues and the deeper ones you talked about. Maybe you throw him out there and look, how many quarterback injuries did we have last year too? So you might be smart to take those second quarterbacks too. We've also got the number 2 pick, and the pick is in. Now, could be Jayden Daniels, could be Drake Maye. We don't know who it's going to be. That is the fun of the NFL draft. I know on your boards, gentlemen, you both have Jayden Daniels as the guy. Thor, is it easy for you? It's Jayden Daniels by that slam dunk. We've already kind of touched on that. What would Jayden Daniels look like in Washington, in your opinion, in that offense, in that situation?
Yeah, I think he's a pretty good fit in Cliff's offense. Cliff, in contrast to what some people might think of the air raid guy, Cliff came up under Leach. He obviously played for Leach in Lubbock at Texas Tech, and then he's been coaching for so long. You might think of him as like, the pocket passer guy that doesn't leave the pocket, because that's how Mike Leach runs his air raid, or ran his air raid. Cliff Kingsbury, he likes the out of structure guys more, is where he leans towards. And obviously Jayden Daniels, what he brings to the NFL, 2 superpowers at throwing downfield and then the scrambling. The one interesting thing about the fit with the Kingsbury offense, thing I like is in the pocket, goes through the progressions, very quiet with that. He has gotten way, way better at reading the field, going through the progressions, finding the right guy, and then knowing when to pull the ball and then start scrambling. But he does not, when he pulls the ball, he's always running. So that's one thing. He does not throw on the run, for instance, like a Caleb or like a JJ McCarthy.
All right, the pick is in, and it is Jayden Daniels, the quarterback, going off the board to the Washington Commanders. So now the draft really begins, because this is what a lot of us all anticipated was going to be the case. So Jayden Daniels now officially a Washington Commander. Debro, your thoughts on this selection here?
Thor and I called this in February. If people were listening to the draft show, this was the first episode that dropped, and we told you to bet the line for Jayden Daniels to be the second overall pick. We said to bet him. He's going to the Commanders. If you bet it then, congrats. It was plus money when it opened. I'm loving it.
All right. Let's continue on here with now where the draft starts to really shake out, because do the Patriots stay at 3? Do they make a change here? That is going to be, the history of the Patriots. It tells us that they always trade back. Well, they're in a unique position because Bill Belichick, for the first time in decades, is not running the ship here. So Andrew Erickson is sweating things out in the green room. But before we get to the next pick, a fun poll going up here right now. Who wins early best dressed award for tonight on this show? Is it Derek Brown, myself, Thor, or Andrew Erickson? Debro wins the poll. 50% of the people think Derek Brown is the best dressed person. I came in second at 36. Thor came in at 9%, which the rustic look is still very much in certain Midwestern areas. But who were the 4% that thought Erickson was the best dressed in his t-shirt? Erickson's whole family on the stream tonight. What's that? Don't show me the guns in the ground.
Erickson's texting family members to vote for him.
I mean, come on. 4%? Should be 1% on there. Demand a recount on this. All right. Jayden Daniels is a selection, the LSU quarterback. So we always talk about the bright side of things, Thor. What are the downsides here when it comes to Jayden Daniels? What could be his potential undoing here as you look to, it's always sunshine and roses here, but when it comes to Jayden Daniels, what could potentially be a hurdle for him in this landing spot of Washington?
Well, the risk is that it was the 1 year where he became the superstar out of 5, right? That and I try to give him the benefit of the doubt and tell people about the context, which is he comes in out of high school. He was the face of the franchise that was brought in at Arizona State for Herm Edwards' program there. Antonio Pierce helped lead the charge to get him in there. Antonio Pierce right now has left the Raiders war room and is crying in a bathroom stall trying to collect himself. He'll be back in a second, but he just needs to have a second. The Raiders weren't going to have access to Jayden Daniels despite some of that different stuff. But by the third season at Arizona State, that's where the scandal happened. There was all that stuff swirling. There was a bunch of coaches had to get fired. Then people started transferring out. That was the year where Jayden Daniels badly regressed, goes to LSU. First year, he fixed some stuff, stopped putting the ball up for grabs, was careful with the ball. This past year, that's where you saw the explosive element with his game, the quietness within the pocket, which in contrast to his time at Arizona State, when there was some times where he was like, you'd see the panic really quickly, or you'd see the gears churning in his mind. That's when his physical skill set was playing down because he wasn't making the correct decision, or he was preoccupied with the pass rush, whatnot. It's a contextual thing, being the sort of 1 year wonder when you jumped up, but again, was a high ranked recruit who started for 5 years in college. The other thing that people bring up, this process, the pressure to sack rate was a very popular talking point. Jayden Daniels got quite a bit of discussion on that because his pressure to sack rate was not particularly good the past couple of years. We have brought up the context of how those sacks occurred for him, which was a bit different than some of these other guys. I mentioned his game as he senses the pass rush really well right now, and he does a good job manipulating the space in the pocket. And he's going through the progression. He won't pull it until he has to, until he feels like, okay, it is not there. Then when he pulls it, like I said, he's running. That's one thing we have to work on, because opposing defensive coordinators, if he does not, they will put it in their scouting report every single week for their starting defenders. When that kid pulls the ball down, peel off your assignment. He's not going to throw. But so that thing is a more minor thing. But when he would do the pull down thing and start to go forward, sometimes it was a little bit too late. And so he would get up a couple yards and then he would get sacked there. The sack yardage that he accrued with the sacks that he took was equivalent to a guy that took 25% more sacks than he did in terms of the rote yardage. But it needs to be mentioned nonetheless, because I do think that calculator, it's gotten a lot better, certainly with denoting the pass rush and the spacing and the manipulating the pocket up to that point. But I think that there's still some work that could be done of the exact second that now we're going to take off. And like I said, doing stuff to keep the defense off balance a little bit. Every time we pull the ball down, it's not just shooting upfield, But I will say, this kid enters the NFL. He will be one of the 5 most dangerous scramblers that we have ever seen in the NFL at that position from day one. He is that element of his game is absolutely legit, and it is difficult to load up to try to take it away because he'll just throw the ball over your head, as the SEC found out last year, both with Brian Thomas and then to a lesser extent Nabers, who was doing stuff all over the field.
Thor has the big board up over on FantasyPros.com. You can go check that out, and all the comps for all 500 guys here in the top 500. It's stunning. The pick is in, by the way, for the Patriots. The comp, by the way, for Jayden Daniels, Randall Cunningham, who I shudder to think what Randall Cunningham would have been in this version of the NFL that we see in modern day times, because that version of Randall Cunningham playing in this version of the NFL with the rules would be a very, very different Randall Cunningham. So the quarterback is selected by the New England Patriots, and it's not JJ McCarthy. So Thor's hopes live. It is Drake Maye out of North Carolina, 6'4", 223, and the new quarterback, who looks like he could be a relative of Andrew Erickson. I'm just saying, like, he and Erickson could possibly be at a family reunion at some point in time. So here you have it, boys. Let's have at it. We'll talk about draft comps here. Thor, your big board here for the quarterback Drake Maye is witty enough, Carson Wentz. So somewhere between Carson Palmer and Carson Wentz. Now, I hope it's Carson Palmer, because as a Patriots fan myself, that would make me much happier. D-Bro, let's get your take here on this selection of Drake Maye. I know you've thrown some jabs at him, but regardless, we might think the arm talent is there. Ball placement, decision-making certainly can be improved upon, but those are things you can improve upon. Arm strength is one that's a little bit harder. So the tools are there. Can he be a franchise quarterback for the New England Patriots?
Oh, I think he absolutely can, Joe. I think that he just has some refinements as far as whether it's going through progressions, the footwork, the mirroring, the upper and lower half. And I think that's where you get him into an NFL building and let NFL coaching just do its thing, man. And let him sit. I'm not saying the entire season, but 4 to 6 games, and really try to dial things in for him. And whether they want to cater the offense to make it a little more simplistic, a little bit easier, especially with concepts that he's more familiar with and that it can ease that kind of transition. But with Drake Maye, it's a fabulous pick, man. I mean, I thought the Patriots were going to stick and pick. I never thought they were going to trade this recently, because I just didn't think anybody was going to offer them enough for them to move off of potential franchise quarterback. And I think Maye can be that.
But here's the real question, Derek, is what about the rest of this team? I mean, they've still been bereft of offensive weapons for so long. That's difficult for a young quarterback to come in and have success right away. We just talked about Caleb Williams, what he's walking into with all those receivers, a decent tight end, a running back of varying praise depending on who you talk to. Then you've got Jayden Daniels, who's got, Terry McLaurin at the very least, and some other pieces there that maybe we could talk about in Washington. But Drake Maye, on the other hand, it's not a great wide receiver room. So obviously we're just getting started here. So the Patriots have some time to figure that out, whether it's via trade for Brandon Ayuk or whether it's somebody they draft here. So how important is that now, not just to take this quarterback, but to take the next step here, D-Bro, when it comes to Drake Maye?
I think it's very important, Joe. But I mean, if we're talking about it, the great parts about this draft class is if you're a team that needs offensive line help, this is a great draft class. If you're a team that needs pass catchers to add to your offense, again, this is a great draft class. And what the Patriots could do, I mean, looking at their pick situation, I think it's very possible either they mortgage a little bit of their future equity for next year and go up and try to get another 2 pass catchers in this draft, or trade down from 34, pick yourself up an extra pick, and whether that's a 4th or 5th round or what have you with the type of trade. But this is a draft class where late round 2, round 3, maybe even round 4, there are skilled and competent pass catchers that you can go out and get in this class to add to the offense. Because the other part about this is they do have some weapons. Like Hunter Henry is still there. He's solid. Pop Douglas flashed in his rookie season. So really, what are you looking to try to get with this team? I think that if I'm the Patriots, I trade down, you add to the offensive line, whether that's tackle or guard, they have needs at both, and you add pass catchers, which, I mean, come on, man. You can add a Ben Sinnott in the 4th round, run some more 12 personnel if you don't have enough wide receivers. There's a lot of outs for the Patriots to still surround Maye with competent pass catchers in this draft.
Thor, my favorite draft wager was the order of the QBs 1, 2, 3 at plus 360. I got this, and I got it at number 1, Caleb Williams, number 2, Jayden Daniels, number 3, Drake Maye. Feels pretty good right now. So I am loving life. I'm very happy about this. This has gone exactly chalk. So far, so good here. Number 4 on the board. The pick is in for the Arizona Cardinals. We anticipate it being Marvin Harrison. It'll be a very chalky beginning to this draft, Thor. Is that where you indeed think that Marvin Harrison is going to land here with the 4th pick to the Arizona Cardinals?
Just a couple words on Drake Maye's game.
Oh, sure,
first.
yeah.
The thing that I'm concerned about with him, you talk about pulling weeds.
Sure, you want to depress me. You're waiting all this time to depress me. I got a franchise quarterback finally again.
Yeah, no.
I had to watch Cam Newton for 2 years.
Yeah. Just want to get it in quick before the other pick goes. It's the stuff under pressure. Of the top 9 quarterbacks that I rank, Maye was the only one whose accuracy percentage was under 71% when blitzed, and last year under duress. But where I feel like he sometimes eschews his mechanics. I don't think it's a panic thing. I just think that the coaching, we've seen this with Mac Brown quarterbacks going back 20 years, but 43.3% of 90 passes under pressure last season, 7-5 TD INT rate with 28 sacks. However, the howitzer arm is real. He has those athletic traits. He has a playmaking bent. He sees the entire field. I like the way that he manipulates the pocket right after the beats of the snap. And the thing that you particularly love about his projection to the NFL, though, not only the downfield stuff, you think about that, like in the Phil Longo thing in 2022, he was just destroying people down the field. But in the translation to the NFL, those heat ring intermediate throws between the hashes, Drake Maye is fabulous at that. Over the last 2 seasons, Drake Maye 93.3 PFF grade on 110 attempts over the middle between the hashes. That part of his game looks good. You just have to be a little bit patient with him early on. And this situation for him is one that you wonder about a little bit, just because the supporting cast right now, what you want to hold your comments a little bit about it, because we'll see what they end up doing tomorrow. But the supporting cast right now, not the best around him. I would just advise patience early on, but his ceiling absolutely is right up there with any of those other top 4 quarterbacks.
Well, speaking of ceiling, Marvin Harrison Jr., Ohio State's own, off the board. Your comp for him, Thor, AJ Green. So let's get your take here. Is going to land here with Kyler Murray. Obviously, Hall of Fame bloodlines here for Marvin Harrison. He's got size, he has speed, he has strength, he's got high IQ. He's got it all. Is there any way here that this doesn't end up becoming a Pro Bowl wide receiver? Because certainly Marvin Harrison seems to be on that track.
I would be real surprised. Yeah, the floor is super duper high with Marvin Harrison Jr. and the ceiling is an atrium. I don't even know that it exists. You have a kid here who had a Hall of Fame wide receiver personal tutor from birth, and people keep in mind Marvin Harrison Sr. had to teach himself all the little things about the wide receiver position, the perfect release off the line every single time, being the route running technician, the hands. He couldn't drop any balls because he entered the NFL out of Syracuse at 175 pounds. He did not have the physical measurables. So the only path for Marvin Harrison Sr. to greatness was becoming awesome at the craft of being a wide receiver. He just so happened to have a son who got all the genetics that he could only dream about in Marvin Jr. 6'3" and a quarter, 209 pounds, freak of an athlete. Last couple of years in the Big Ten, contextually, extremely impressive. Marvin Harrison Jr. goes to the school that has the most stacked receiving core that we see every single year. They send the first round receivers there every single time. Mm-hmm. As a true freshman, didn't play as much, but as a true sophomore, he shoved in through the receiving core with Jackson Smith and Jigba and Emeka Egbuka. And all of a sudden, Marvin Harrison Jr. was the guy that the opposing defenses were most afraid of. I mentioned earlier, last 2 seasons, Marvin Harrison Jr., 100th percentile in receiving grade against single man coverage. That's why you saw defensive coordinators so often throwing double teams at him. This started probably midway through a sophomore season or a little bit later on in there. This season, he got a steady dose of it. Last year, they switched from C.J. Stroud to Kyle McCord. So now you can't say, oh, it's just because he had a good quarterback as well. He shoved through this super duper crowded wide receiver room, was a star right away. kept being a star even when they were throwing all the different coverage stuff at him. And then this year they go from CJ Stroud to Kyle McCord, who was so bad behind center. They banished him to Syracuse in the transfer portal after the season was done. Marvin Harrison Jr. last year, 33% target rate. That went to 40% when it was in man coverage. When Kyle McCord denoted man coverage, he was looking at Marvin Harrison Jr. every single time. Last thing I'll say, just to show people how impressive Marvin Harrison Jr. was in college, Matt Harmon, a guy whose work I really respect, the reception perception guy, because he watches the games, charts them out, the route, the different covers look they got, different stuff like that. In the time that he has been charting college receivers coming into the NFL, he has never charted a receiver who was doubled more often than Marvin Harrison Jr. And of the group that was doubled even half as often as he was on a per snap basis, Marvin Harrison Jr. had the best success rate of any of those guys against double coverage. It is really difficult for the defense to decide exactly, like, are we just going to toss two guys at him and now everyone else gets spacing? Or are we going to, the way that I put it, put someone in a steak suit and kick him into the Shark Tank and leave him in single man coverage against Marvin Harrison Jr.?
There's an image for you.
Steak
D-Bro.
suit.
Yeah, that's what they're going to wear. That's what Thor's wearing on tomorrow night for night 2. He's wearing the steak suit. D-Bro. The Marvin Harrison Jr. landing spot and your fantasy analysis, where does this put him in terms of rank? Can he be a wide receiver 1 as early as rookie season?
Yeah, we talked about this. People want to pull this up on YouTube while you're watching the NFL draft and you're listening to this. We talked about landing spots, I think 2 weeks ago. And I said, this is the landing spot you want for Marvin Harrison Jr. If you look at the Cardinals, last year they threw the ball 555 times, even ballparking them. And that was with a bottom 7 neutral passing rate. Even ballparking 550 passing attempts, if we think Marvin Harrison Jr. is that guy, 25%, 27% target share, we're talking about a rookie wide receiver that could legit be top 12 amongst all wide receivers in raw target volume in his rookie season. When my ranks are updated by Monday on FantasyPros.com, he will be ranked as a wide receiver 1 right now in redraft ranks.
Go. You love to see it. I'd love to see you back in a few picks, but we're going to say goodbye to Derek Brown for now and get Mr. Patriot's take on Drake Maye and the Chargers pick coming up here. So let's go to Andrew Erickson. Andrew Erickson, you're going to have the ability here to give us your take. Before we get to that real quick, there is a giveaway we've got going on here on the show. So we have a fun giveaway. We're giving away a Cam Akers jersey here. So if you would like to get in on this, all you got to do is subscribe to the channel, drop a comment below. That's it. Like the stream. A very easy way for you to get involved in a fun giveaway here. So we are going to get Andrew Erickson up here in a moment. When we do, we'll get his take on what's going on here with the New England Patriots. I think he is very happy from what I saw in his reaction. I think we're both just happy that they didn't trade out. So whenever we get Andrew back here, we will. But Thor, are you surprised? 1 minute and 30 seconds left that the Chargers did not go ahead. Oh, there's Andrew Erickson. So Andrew, I'll ask you the same question here. And there goes Andrew Erickson. So this is fun. This is live television, folks. And then there's Andrew Erickson. Andrew Erickson, are you surprised that the Chargers stayed here at 5? And do you expect them to take Joe Alt here?
I'm not surprised they stayed at 5. I think that teams realized that they maybe didn't need to go up all the way to 5 to try to acquire the next quarterback, offensive tackle, etc. Because a lot of the teams, 6, 7, 8, they want to trade down too. So you don't necessarily need to trade up to the highest spot. Maybe people aren't buying the bluff that the Giants, I think, are about the quarterbacks that they're interested in. So for me, I think it's going to be O-line. I put in my mock draft, JC Latham. So that's what I'm going to go with. See what happens.
Okay, so Latham is the pick here for you. We can see how that goes. We'll get Thor's opinion on that too and bring him back into the chat and see what he thinks. But I'm a little surprised. I thought there was opportunity here for the Chargers to get some more picks here, maybe trade back. They got a lot of work to do. They had cap issues. They had a lot of issues. The pick is in 249 passing yards allowed last year, third most in the NFL. So certainly they could use some help on the defensive side too. So Thor, your prediction for this pick at 1-5 as the Chargers stand pat here and your Minnesota Vikings so far do not leapfrog into the top 5.
I'm cheating a little bit because I seen it on the sheet, but it is shock. Joe Alt is going to be the pick here. The correct decision, I believe, is being made, barring what we don't know, the black box of the trade offers that were being made to them. It's interesting because that thing must have gone all the way down to the end. The clock expired, but they're going to get this pick in here. But seems like they were talking to the very end there on the telephones, decide in the end to go with Joe Alt. We were talking about this before the show. If sticking in this spot, that is clearly who I would have taken. If I'm Jim Harbaugh, and we talked about this when we were doing the props and different stuff like that. The prop for Joe Alt going in the slot, I thought was one of the better values that you could have gotten going back a couple weeks ago. I just think it hadn't been baked in enough. But a perfect fit for Jim Harbaugh to begin his tenure with Los Angeles. Sort of tipped this off, like I was talking about what he was discussing at the owners' meetings. Offensive line, offensive line, offensive line, offensive line. That's what he did at Michigan as well. He wants to run the ball. That's what he wants to do. And then he doesn't want the opposing pass rush to get near his quarterback when he does allow the quarterback to go back and throw. But he wants to establish that physicality from the early downs on. Joe Alt, tremendous prospect. I mentioned before that his father was the longtime Chiefs offensive tackle. Joe Alt, another guy who had the tutor from birth, plays similarly to the father, the spatial awareness and the smoothness that he has at those enormous dimensions, because the guy's a skyscraper, but he moves around more like a 6'5" guy or a 6'4" guy, just how smooth he is. And then he has the enormous wingspan. It is so difficult for speed rushers to get around him. And then he can just shut you down with the power on the inside. And he's seen it all, probably because his dad helped him out with that, watching film, different stuff like watch this counter move, and yada, yada. And the concept is proven the last 2 years on the blind side at Notre Dame for Joe Alt was tremendous both seasons. And importantly, in both phases as a run blocker and as a pass protector.
Size, strength, high football IQ, another guy with pedigree. That's two guys taken back to back here with Hall of Fame caliber dads in the NFL. So not too bad here. And when Harbaugh made those comments, Jim, that is, Thor, I went to bet this, and I'm very happy I did. So I am really happy so far how this draft, the first 5 picks, I gotta say, I haven't usually, last year, I made a lot of bets at the end. This year, I was very disciplined. I kind of waited on it a little bit. I waited to see how things were going, and I didn't see any changes that really wanted to move me. And I'm glad I didn't, because so far, so good. Now I just need your Vikings to take JJ McCarthy, and my night is going to be pretty good, in the words of Larry David. Let's get your take here, Andrew Erickson, on the pick of Alt, but I also want to talk to you about Drake Maye before the Giants come up next at 6.
So I think the Alt pick makes a lot of sense. I mean, I know that it's funny. We were all convinced it was going to be Alt, and then Latham got the steam, and of course, it ends up just being Joe Alt in the end, like it should have been probably from the beginning.
Just like last year, the number 2 pick, actually, the number 1 pick should have always been CJ Stroud, but that's another live stream.
So,
that's I mean,
we can sometimes get too in the weeds with, this is a left tackle, but does he play right tackle? And it's like, when they get to the NFL level, it's like the guy can play both sides. So clearly the Chargers aren't concerned about putting him at right tackle, because they obviously have Slater, so he'll be the left tackle. They'll have Joe Alt light him on the right side. So again, it makes sense of protection. They want to run the football, win through the trenches. Makes sense with Harbaugh as the head coach there.
All right. So Erickson, real quick, let's get your take on the Drake Maye selection here. Your initial reaction was what?
I love it. I think they made the right choice.
Okay.
I think that Elliott Wolf realizes that you need a quarterback with a top 10 ceiling to have a chance, especially in the AFC. And Drake Maye has that. I don't care if Drake Maye has a bottom, 30-second quarterback outcome, because that doesn't matter. Like if you draft another player with a Mac Jones ceiling, you're going to be mediocre at best. And that's going to get you literally nowhere, especially the AFC with all the stacked quarterbacks. So I think that it was a shoot for ceiling. Elliott Wolf talked about that in one of his press conferences. When he said upside, I was like, it's going to be Drake Maye. That he's going to be the pick. So he was there. I think it was the right pick that they made. From a fantasy perspective, sucks for Drake Maye, because he would have been way better off playing on the Minnesota Vikings. And honestly, the Patriots did almost every other NFL team a solid by not letting a guy like Drake Maye slip to the Vikings, because that would have been much more deadly, I think, for Drake Maye's fantasy ceiling. So we'll see how the Patriots play out the rest of the draft, play out the rest of the offseason if they add another receiver, upgrade the offensive line. So we'll see. But for now, Not hyped up to draft Drake Maye in redraft leagues, dynasty. It's a different scenario because it's more long term. But for this year, I'm not necessarily expecting a ton from Drake Maye production wise.
All right, let's do a little prediction time here. So the pick is in for the Giants, so the Giants are not moving here out of this spot. Thor Nystrom, is this where Malik Nabers goes?
I know that it is, and
Yes.
and I was briefly terrified there for a second because my roommate is watching the draft upstairs, and I heard some yelling up there while my mic was muted, which either meant a good thing or a bad thing. Obviously, coming to you guys live from Minneapolis. Right now, everyone in Minneapolis Minnesota is on pins and needles because this was the scenario that I referred to over the last month as the calling the Giants bluff gambit, right?
Mm-hmm.
There had always been that idea that the Giants had put it out there. We'll take the QB4 if he gets down to us because they wanted someone to hop them in the Vikings in order to take, for instance, Arizona off the board is taking the wide receiver or take the Chargers, whatever. And then maybe a better guy filters down to you. But in the end, the Giants do go for the immediate help. Makes all kinds of sense. We were talking about this in the pre-show, how rancid that Giants receiving core is. Interesting that they go with Nabers. We talked about that against Odunze being that bigger boundary guy, but most people have Nabers ranked above Odunze as I do. So they're going with the guy that most people think is a slightly better player. That's typically what you want to do in this scenario. I think it's a good pick. The interesting thing here is that QB4 now, it becomes a very interesting deal. How far, could that guy fall? JJ, could he fall all the way to 11 without Kwesi having to pony up any draft equity? I think is something to keep an eye on. But this was a very good pick for the Giants and exactly what they needed.
All right, fantasy breakdown. Andrew Erickson, let's talk about it here. Malik Nabers is now a New York Giant. They got their alpha dog, big-time wide receiver. But what does it look like in year one with Daniel Jones? Where would this ranking be for you of Malik Nabers?
I think I'll still be in like the top 24 conversation. When I put up polls on X about, looking at some of these landing spots because it seemed like everyone was convinced there was a top tier receiver. So I was like, all right, well, let's look at it from another perspective. Like, let's rank the landing spots. And everybody ranked the Giants last, basically. Every time I asked, like, Chargers, Cardinals, Patriots, everyone's like, don't want the Giants. But for me, like, we're looking at a guy who's going to get a ton of volume. Like, that's the first thing he needs. And if anyone can get by on more shoddy volume, it's Malik Nabers, who's dynamite after the catch. Just get him the ball and he'll do the rest. So I think Daniel Jones is good enough to facilitate Malik Nabers to be at least a wide receiver 2. You're baking in his explosiveness. If you think he's this good, then it shouldn't matter what the quarterback plays because he's going to get so much opportunity in this barren offense where the offense can be featured around him. We were hyped up last year, at least Debro and I, about Darren Waller being the feature piece of this offense. He's going to retire. That was their offense last year. So imagine what they could do with Malik Nabers. Again, I mentioned earlier in the show, thought he looked a lot like Stephon Diggs. And now Brian Daboll's got his Stephon Diggs again with Daniel Jones. So we saw Josh Allen take a major step forward when he got Diggs. Maybe we see that with Daniel Jones take a major step forward with Malik Nabers.
Thank goodness for everybody else. There was a level-headed, handsome, bald man telling everyone to ignore the Darren Waller hype. This guy right here. You're welcome, America. I'm here for you. Thor Nystrom, your dream is still alive of maybe, the Vikings just sitting tight where they are and getting JJ McCarthy. It could be indeed just that. As we're looking ahead now, coming up next, we're going to have, after the Giants, the Tennessee Titans. Now, you had predicted earlier, Thor, that tackle possibly be for them. Is Latham the selection in your mind here for them? A slam dunk?
I don't think that. No,
Okay.
because to me, you would prioritize the blindside guy above that.
Okay.
Yeah, Latham's going to be great, but as a right tackle, the Titans just so desperately need the blindside guy just because that's Levis's biggest bugaboo. And you're not giving him a fair shake if you have that left tackle and the tackle plate they have right now. I'm very curious right now if they because I could see them pulling up Fashanu here because he is the one guy where it is the clean fit. That you can go in right away and pass protect. Fatanu, I think, would be in play as well. It does look like they're going to pick. I was going to mention, I wonder how much they're talking on the telephone right now. We're going to find out. But yeah, I would definitely lean towards the offensive tackle here.
All right. Is that where you would also go, Andrew Erickson, the offensive tackle side here for the Tennessee Titans?
I think so. I think that's probably what I would do, but it really wouldn't surprise me if Callahan, in a situation a couple years ago with the Bengals, it was receiver versus offensive line. Receiver came out on top, so Odunze's still on the board, so we'll see.
All right, the pick is in. So regardless, we can still talk a little bit about the Tennessee Titans. Ooh. Andrew, in your opinion here, what is your take on Will Levis in year 2 here for this Titans offense?
I think that they're putting all the pieces around to get an answer about Will Levis. He came out guns blazing against the Atlanta Falcons and was never really good after that game, but he flashed. And I think that he's an interesting player for fantasy where he invites a lot of chaos to his games. Like, he throws it downfield, but he can be erratic. He takes sacks. He fumbles the ball, kind of like Gardner Minshew, where you play him in games, and then what do you know? The Titans hit another over because both teams are scoring because there's so many turnovers. So that invites a fantasy-friendly environment. So I think for fantasy, Will Levis can actually be like a sneaky type of quarterback 2 that you draft late, especially in one quarterback leagues where he's got weapons. So I'm very intrigued by Levis.
Thor, I don't know if we ever got your breakdown last year on the show on Will Levis because he was on day 2 selection. So in your opinion here, what you saw out of Will Levis, not just in college, but also what you saw out of him in year 1 in the pros, do you think Levis is a guy that is going to reach his potential?
No, because you can't completely, like, the thing of like the sensing the pressure and making the decision, that split second decision and have it being correct. Stuff like that is not stuff that I think entirely goes away. I think that he could improve at it, and you could put him in a better situation, certainly by improving your tackle play. Can confirm that the Titans have just done that. I'm going to give myself partial credit on this pick. I got the position right. My supposition, though, about the preference for the guy on the left may have been wrong. This will be JC Latham coming up here. And I love JC Latham's game. I want to say that right from the get. JC Latham was my number 2 offensive tackle behind Joe Alt. I just absolutely love his game. But again, like I was mentioning before, he's going to be a monster right tackle for the next decade. But and that's awesome. The Titans needed 2 starting offensive tackles, not just 1. They still have the issue at left right now. At least your depth has improved now as well. I still wonder what they're going to do with that. I would like a better guy out there for Levis, but JC Latham is and somewhat of a throwback to the Titans. When they were doing the physical run game stuff under what they used to call it, the exotic smash mouth, whatever nonsense.
Exotic smash mouth. Yes,
yeah, I
missed that.
Yeah, throw it back, and now we're going to start punching people in the mouth again. I like the pick of Latham in terms of that, but the left tackle thing is something I still think the Titans need to address some way. Might happen after the draft.
All right, so we'll keep an eye on that here. Obviously, don't forget day 2. We're going to be here for everything as well to take us through. So far after 7 picks, Latham going here next. It looks as though we are, again, no trades quite yet here on the program. The next team up is going to be the Atlanta Falcons, also a team that had in the past potentially been rumored to be moving some pieces back a little bit, maybe take some more draft capital, or could potentially stay put here, go on the defensive side of the football. So Erickson, as we're awaiting the official news for Latham to be the pick here, in your opinion, what do you think the Atlanta Falcons end up doing?
Well, my wallet is saying it's Byron Murphy. That's what my wallet is screaming for, that he's the 8th overall pick and the first pick by the Atlanta Falcons. So I think it is defensive player, but I mean, there's a lot of directions they could go. Quinion Mitchell, they want to go corner. Dallas Turner has been the chalky pick the entire mock draft season. So, or if they trade out, JJ McCarthy's still on the board. Bo Nix is still on the board. I don't know how he's made it to 8. I was told that all these quarterbacks are going to get drafted in the top 4. So I'd be interested, but most likely a defensive player if Atlanta sticks and picks at 8. And I hope it's Murphy. I will be very happy if it is Murphy.
I'm curious, Thor. How much do you have invested in Jay? Not just like spiritually. I'm talking about actual investment in JJ McCarthy actually becoming the Vikings quarterback here in a few minutes.
Oh, you know that I'm heavily invested in that. Yeah. Because it's both. I mean, it's two things. Yeah, obviously the need, but the number one, you guys know I think he's a stud. I think JJ McCarthy will be a star in the NFL. And the the alternate path for the Vikings here, if they didn't end up getting him, those terrify me almost as much as the idea of spending the next 10 years with JJ excites me. And I'm talking about a reach on whether it be Penix or whether it be Bo Nix. So that's what we're sort of, in between right there. But the Kevin O'Connell offense is a perfect fit for JJ McCarthy, and qualitatively to me is heads and shoulders times 10 above Penix, who is heads and shoulders times 10 above Bo Nix, at least in my way of seeing things.
All right, JC Latham for me so far, by the way, is winning the fashion show. He looks good. The drip is good for JC Latham. Started all 14 games at right tackle last year in 2023 for the Crimson Tide. Alabama tackle is now officially a Tennessee Titan, so that is very exciting there. I want to remind everybody, too, as we are going through here, that we do have discussions going on our Discord, fantasypros.com/chat. So if you want to talk about the picks, who should have picked who, you're mad your team didn't take somebody already, or you're excited like Thor that maybe you are going to get your guy, join the discussion at fantasypros.com/chat. It is free. It is fun. Our experts are in there as well, chatting with you. Again, talking NFL draft tonight, but we are talking football 365 days a year, and also baseball and wagering and all kinds of fun stuff. So make sure that you are joining our Discord today. And again, there's a lot of benefits when you are a premium member here at Fantasy Pros too. You get involved in stages. You can ask questions of the experts and be in interactions with them too, which is a good time. All right, so let's get after it here with the next pick. So the Atlanta Falcons now officially on the board, and we will track that pick for you. Coming up soon, we're going to have Derek Brown back with us. And later on tonight, Scott Bogman's going to join us. So we have the best of the best whenever it comes to the NFL draft. Now, I don't know if this is official here or if Mike Mayo is Mr. Mayor himself is pulling our leg with this next pick here. I can't imagine that is true, but if it is indeed, things are going to get real wacky real fast. You can see the look on Thor's face here. Now, is this a draft and trade scenario? Because that's what it feels like to me, Thor. If indeed this is what it is. And I don't want to say it yet because it's not official as of right now. But the look on Thor's face is screen grab worthy. So I hope from a social media standpoint we're doing it. Because the rumor is right now that the pick is Michael Penix. Now, that I don't understand. If the Falcons are drafting Penix, it's to draft and then trade him. Obviously, you don't go get Kirk Cousins and then turn that around. So, Thor, I gave you a couple seconds to process your feelings. What are your feelings and thoughts if indeed Penix is somehow the selection here at the Falcons?
It's stunning on a couple different levels. Obviously, they just gave all their salary cap resources. They just devoted that into Kirk Cousins. Mm-hmm. So, and you have multiple years of that position that are now solved, and you're going to take a quarterback who is in college for 6 years, with the number 8 pick. Do you not have any intentions of attempting to win during the 2 years where you signed Kirk, or 3 years or whatever it is? What about the window for that? I don't. The thing with, I mean, you don't really see too often a player.
I've never seen you speechless. I've known you for a few years now. Speechless Thor is not a version of Thor that I see very often.
I'm just trying to process this thing. Obviously, someone in that building really loved Michael Penix, which fine, great. You love Michael Penix. You had the 8th pick. Why did you give all your free agent money to Kirk Cousins then? Right, like. If you were going to take Penix, that's a guy who should be playing right away. If he can't play right away, can he play at all? Right? I mean, again, 6 years in college, had the 4 season-ending injuries in a row at Indiana. You have to project him as a guy who's going to come in early. But it's like now they picked him as the Jordan Love to the Aaron Rodgers. I'm just so confused by what they've done here, and they had legitimate roster holes. All 3 defensive levels
Yeah.
The two, right? The defensive front, be it the interior defensive lineman, Murphy.
Right, you're looking for an edge rusher. You're
been a
looking for a
great pick.
corner.
Yeah,
right, that's
or
what you're looking for here.
Turner against Latu, and then Mitchell against Arnold. You got to lead the dance. There has been no defender taken. To go Penix here is off the grid in a way that I don't understand. I'm curious to get an explanation when they have to answer for this.
Well, from a fantasy perspective, if indeed Michael Penix is officially the next selection, it's not a draft and trade, which we've seen before. So I'm trying to make sure Thor's brain doesn't melt down here in the 9 o'clock hour, because we've still got a few hours left to go of the NFL draft. I don't want that to happen quite yet. But Erickson, Michael Penix then becomes a guy that if you draft in your dynasty league, you're going to have to sit on for multiple seasons potentially.
So I'm looking at this from a different perspective, because I actually have a Michael Penix to the Falcons ticket that just cashed at plus 3,000.
Okay.
Oh, wow.
So number one,
congrats, brother.
But also this means my quarterbacks going under 4.5 that's all burned. That's going to burn, because
the NFL draft gods giveth and the NFL draft gods taketh
exactly.
Away.
So, when I made the case for making the bet, I looked into it a little bit more. Taylor Heineke, last year of his contract, I looked at the Falcons roster, and overall, we looked at them with a defensive piece because we felt like that's what they needed. They felt like they were set on offense. So I felt like the Falcons were a more complete team, and that they actually did need to invest into the backup quarterback position, because Kirk Cousins is coming off a torn Achilles injury. This is how this team crashes and burns, is Kirk Cousins not ready. So I think that's the angle that they're looking at, is we feel good about our defense. We know our offense is loaded. We just have to make sure we have a quarterback, and we have Kirk, but he's coming off a torn Achilles. We cannot afford to blow at a quarterback. So they doubled down and drafted Michael Penix, who Thor talked about. It's he can step in and play right away, because he has the experience. So I get that from a value perspective. Again, he should have gone to round 2. We can argue that. We don't know. We don't know if he was going to fall to round 2 or whatever. So I get that. But the Falcons have a good defense. They have pieces in place. They could have improved at edge or cornerback, but I really don't hate it as much. Again, it's not a home run pick, but that's how at least I'm seeing the pick here. So
the interesting thing here, though, is, the Atlanta Falcons, I think, it's very surprising. I think, let's put it out there just like that. I've been a Penix apologist, and Scott Bogman knows this, because all year long, I would hit him up every Saturday evening and say, man, I really like Penix, what I saw to him today. Penix to me is that guy that's got the ability to make the big throws. He's got the stones to do it in the big spots too. So arm strength is not an issue for Penix. Again, athleticism is there for Penix. I understand what you're saying, Thor. A guy that's, 6 years of college is a lot of college. Those people sometimes are called doctors. But in the NFL, that's not always what you're looking to do from an investability standpoint. However, now that this is in here, and it does seem like it is not a trade scenario, if Kirk Cousins only plays another year or two, let's say, perhaps that's what he's told them, is, hey, I've got a year or two left in this body. I'm letting you know now. Is this potentially a very savvy move when you put that perspective on it?
Categorically, no. This was stupid.
I tried so hard. Thor.
Yeah,
I tried so hard, but
it doesn't make any sense from any perspective. Again, great. You love Michael Penix. Knock yourself out. Pick him here. Why did you give Cousins that contract then? You could have delineated that salary cap space elsewhere. I really don't understand it. To me, this is an egregious reach, number one, by a team that didn't need the 6-year player when they have the veteran quarterback signed for multiple years. I don't know what you're doing is skewing the short-term needs. When you draft, when you sign a guy like Kirk Cousins, you're seemingly indicating that you're attempting to win here these next couple of years. And if it was the other way, you like Penix so much, why did you sign Cousins? Penix is the guy that comes in, plays right away. If he's not a finished product right now, I don't know what else we're going to see. The guy had one of the best offensive play callers that we have in college football. He's a guy, Kalen DeBoer is a guy who is so gifted at what he does. He got Tom Allen, who is this can of a head coach at Indiana, the kind of dopey guy. He got Tom Allen, this extension that is going to take care of Tom Allen's family for generations, 20 generations, because Kalen DeBoer was so good, etc. But Kalen DeBoer was the guy that coached Penix, throughout, with a couple of exceptions in there when he went to Fresno State. DeBoer did, but they met up then again back at Washington. You have right now Penix coming out of Washington as close to what he is going to be. I'll get into the things that I'll start with what I like. The kid has an awesome arm. Okay. The pill shoots out of there. That's super. Like it's the mechanics are non-repeatable and wonky, but like, so it, sometimes it doesn't make sense, but it's like a guy like Stafford.
Put a pin in Penix for one moment, Thor, because the pick is in here for the Chicago Bears. They have made their selection too. This is their second pick in the first 9 selections here. Wow. And they've gone Rome Odunze, so wide receiver off the board. I want to continue the Penix conversation. I just want to get this Odunze pick in here. So Odunze is now a Bear. So they have
interesting symmetry there with Odunze. Yeah, Penix is number 1 receiver going right after him.
Yeah, right after him. I guess the before we even continue on with Odunze, is what you're saying is correct, Thor. If indeed Penix was your guy, I don't even know if it's sacrilege you took him in the first round. Isn't it more of a sacrilege to say you could have moved down and gotten more draft capital if that was the guy they wanted to pick? First and foremost, you could have moved down 2 picks, maybe 3 picks. Maybe that's where the Buffalo Bills could have come into play, moved up to take Odunze, because obviously the Chicago Bears had their eyes on him because they took him. Now that we know that's the case. So to me, the bigger fault isn't taking Penix. It's not taking Penix in the first round. Oh. It's that they probably could have moved down to take Penix and we still have the cake and eating it too.
I'm sorry to interrupt. We have a trade, folks. My Minnesota Vikings have moved up to the 10 slot here and are now on the clock, swapping with the Jets. You have to assume for a quarterback here.
Considering that quarterbacks are flying.
Bo Nix, right? There you go.
I was gonna say if
I will walk off the set. Although after that Penix pick, I don't know. I mean, we're kind of in crazy land a little bit.
He would not draft a 24-year-old court. We know he's not gonna. We know it's McCarthy. It's gonna.
All right, so we'll keep a close eye on that. Rome Odunze, let's get your take here from a fantasy perspective. So Caleb Williams now has Rome Odunze, but it seems like Andrew. I know Debro, I think, mentioned this last time we chatted, that it could be more of a Seattle Seahawks scenario of last year, right? Where you have the 2 guys already kind of in there, and then the third guy you draft and everybody's really excited about him, but you really don't hear much about him in year 1. Is that the kind of situation Odunze is walking into with the Bears?
I definitely understand the parallels between the situations. You have 2 guys who are established in the offense. You're adding a third piece. So it does make it kind of tricky. And I'm very interested to see how the market reacts to Rome Odunze, because dynasty-wise, you're like, oh, he's attached to Caleb Williams for the rest of his career. Like, that's exciting. But it's like, okay, year 1 might be a little bumpy. How much are you going to pay for like the lumps in year 1, where it may not be week 1 where Rome Odunze is an absolute monster, because Keenan Allen and DJ Moore are alphas in this offense. So it's like, you're going to have to wait your time. And it's like, after year 1, what if he doesn't do a lot? Like, how are you going to feel? Like, how do people that have Jackson Smith-Njigba feel right now? Like, you don't feel great. Now, the difference is Geno Smith versus Caleb Williams. So, like, your long-term prospects are much higher for Rome Odunze. So, really, I think it's maybe more of a temper expectations and redraft. But, like, dynasty, like, I still don't think that, even if, obviously, we'll see the other receivers get drafted, but I don't think you want to knock down Odunze too far. Even if we get other receivers that project for, more targets, just because of the tier of receiver that he's in with these other guys.
Yeah, I mean, JSN last year, everybody was really excited about, but I felt like Debbie Downer kind of putting a pin in it, because it felt like, guys, he's still behind 2 guys that are going to eat way more than him, and you got to factor in some sort of Geno Smith regression, and guess what? You got that, and bad things happen. Now, it's not regression because Caleb Williams is a rookie, so it's more about progression and how fast that happens. Thor, your ideas, both short and long term, when it comes to Rome Odunze, because Odunze is that guy, and we do have a trade official here where the Vikings have indeed moved up here to the 10 spot. So let's talk about this real quick here. Let's get Odunze in, and then let's get to the Vikings selection here.
Odunze is great. He's going to be a great fit. The Vikings just got JJ McCarthy. I utterly ecstatic. Obviously, the Vikings.
I knew. I just wanted you to announce it.
Yeah, you knew I was going to bounce out.
That's my gift to you.
Odunze is going to be awesome, and now you have 3 amazing receivers. Caleb Williams, my man. Earlier in the process, we mentioned this before. I was putting Odunze in that slot every single time. Late, I heard
Thor, we want McCarthy. We want McCarthy. Give us McCarthy.
Give us JJ McCarthy. This was a fit that I'm going to move on to JJ and the Vikings right now.
Sure.
That I saw right from the moment, at least the fit of a player into an offensive play caller system from the second JJ McCarthy declared. And you can go back on my timeline. When the announcement came out, I quote tweeted it that second with one of those doctored things at JJ McCarthy in a Vikings jersey. This was a tailor-made fit, and he's going to a team. Obviously, you have all the infrastructure there, the ideal spot. Jefferson, Addison, you have Hawkinson, you have the really good tackles. You have a good running back now. You have the offensive play caller in Kevin O'Connell. And so you have the whole thing that is set up. And by the way, next offseason, the Vikings are going to have the most salary cap room. And in terms of the fit of the game, JJ McCarthy was the other guy in addition to Drake Maye, where they're so successful over the middle of the field. All the NFL concepts you saw with JJ McCarthy in that 12 personnel offense that he ran for a sitting NFL head coach, Mr. Harbaugh, last year in leading Michigan to the national title. The skill set with JJ McCarthy was underblown coming in, and he is a less risky prospect, I think, than the general discourse that was surrounding him for some of these different reasons. This is a fabulous pick for the Vikings. They somehow got this done while retaining the 23rd pick, while retaining the 2025 round 1 pick. This is a bonanza.
Yeah, I want to get that full breakdown here, so we'll see if I can get that up to get that full breakdown of the trade and what went down here besides just that swapping of picks. Let's get your take here before we bring back Derek Brown. Andrew Erickson, JJ McCarthy, what does this mean for his fantasy value and for the value as the doctor jersey is already up there for Thor Nystrom? He'll be wearing that all day tomorrow, I can only assume. He'll be wearing it backwards. Your take here on what this means for Justin Jefferson, because I think that is what concerns fantasy managers the most.
I think the concern should be not to be concerned. Don't be, because Justin Jefferson's a baller, and I trust Thor's analysis and projection on JJ McCarthy more than anyone else. And I'm not going to, if people are afraid to take Justin Jefferson because of JJ McCarthy's quarterback, then let them be. I'm not worried at all. So Justin Jefferson should be right back. He's going to be my wide receiver 2, only behind Jamar Chase. So I feel confident about this Vikings offense continuing to cook. So again, it's just a great infrastructure set up for a young quarterback like McCarthy. And look, as much as I love Drake Maye, the situation matters. And if we're looking up after 8 weeks in the NFL season, chances are McCarthy's having much more success than Drake Maye is if Drake Maye's even playing at that point. So I would rank McCarthy over Drake Maye in probably every type of fantasy format, just because of at least the early season production early in year 1. I'm going to probably lean heavily towards the McCarthy side, just based on the weapons and just based on their overall skill sets.
All right, let's bring back Mr. Peanut, Derek Brown, and let's get his take on this selection here. I'm sure he's got a lot of feelings about Penix, Derek Brown. Let's start with JJ McCarthy instead. Is JJ McCarthy now officially the number 3 quarterback in the Dynasty rookie draft now that he's landed with the Minnesota Vikings?
Did you just call me Mr. Peanut?
I did just call you Mr. Peanut. If you had the monocle, you would have really nailed the entire look. But
there was a question somewhere. I'm sorry, that tore me up.
The question was, now that JJ McCarthy has landed with the Vikings in this offense with a great offensive-minded head coach, with a great wide receiver in Justin Jefferson, is he now officially the 3rd guy on your Dynasty QB board in this rookie draft?
I've had him at QB2 the entire time. He's not moving.
At 2, so you have him over Daniels.
No, Daniels is my QB1. JJ is my QB2.
So over Caleb Williams there.
Yes, sir. And
okay. Why is that? Because that is a spicy meatball right there.
Because right now, the ceiling and floor projection, I'm willing to acknowledge the range of outcomes. I know you love that term, Joe.
I do love your
range. I'm willing to acknowledge the range of outcomes for Caleb Williams. And I'll look at JJ. This was the perfect landing spot the one that, I mean, really the perfect ecosystem for any quarterback to land in. You have Justin Jefferson. We know at some point they'll get TJ Hawkinson back. If they add any other pass catchers in this draft, you got Jordan Addison, you got Aaron Jones, you got a really good play call. I mean, we just saw what Josh freaking Dobbs did in this offense last year. We're talking about him as a top 12 quarterback in certain weeks, man. Like, it's fantastic. I love this spot. Like, I was jumping around my office in the green room when this went down and just, I mean, running laps, man. So this is exactly what we wanted for JJ McCarthy. And really his ability to play off script, people don't give him that credit. They're going to learn in KOC's offense, and they're going to learn fast. I'm not telling you he's starting week 1, but once he gets under center, it's going to be great.
All right. What about Michael Penix going to the Atlanta Falcons? I'd love to get your take on that one before we get the 11th pick in here.
I tweeted it out. I feel like the Atlanta Falcons are a fantasy GM that the clock is ticking down. It's going 3, 2, 1, and they go, I got to pick someone. Oh, no, I got a 4th tight end. That's exactly what I feel like. This is ridiculous. Taking Michael Penix when you just signed and paid the bag to Kirk Cousins? Why? Why at this point? Even if you had to trade down a few spots, what did you think? Like Minnesota's trading up for Michael Penix? Any other teams coming up for Michael Penix? Where you had to take him in the 8th? It's ridiculous.
That's the point I made to Thor, which is I don't think the pick is egregious.
Terrible pick.
I think the fact that you didn't move backwards,
yes,
if that's what you want to do, was egregious. Because I'm sure somebody would have loved to have moved up and taken Rome Odunze, who went 9, who clearly the smoke was real that the Chicago Bears were sniffing around there, because that's where they ended up going. So that is what's more intriguing to me about this.
I will equal the Michael Penix pick this year by the Falcons. This is in the same ballpark and area code as the idiocy of last year when the Seattle Seahawks took Zach Charbonnet in the 2nd round. Although they already had a starting running back. Oh, let's go get another running back. Atlanta's like, well, we got a quarterback.
Well, Pete Carroll is out of the job. So, I mean, that did not work out very well.
It was a terrible pick. Right now, this is, and I don't know if we're going to get a worse pick in the 1st round. Like, I challenge other NFL teams. Like, look, go out there, try to make a worse pick. Because right now, this is definitely going to get my lowest grade of the 1st round.
All right, we know the pick for the Jets, but I wanted to give Thor a little bit of time here to.
You're going to let me talk after the JJ McCarthy pick?
Here's the
appreciate
thing.
that.
I wanted to let you run through all your emotions.
Thank you. Yeah.
So, yes, and we had to transition. There's some technical things that had to happen there, Thor. It just so happens that it happened at the 10 pick. So, Thor, now that you've run the gamut of emotions, you had your good cry. Your evaluation of JJ McCarthy, now a Minnesota Viking officially.
Yeah, I got a couple opinions on the topic. In addition to being dominant over the middle of the field, the KOC thing, the fit with that, the people, they have undersold his tools as well. I see all the time when people are like, "Oh, Thor, you go on these spots," and they'll ask me about McCarthy. They'll be like, "Aren't you concerned that he has a weak arm?" It'll be like, "A weak arm? Have you watched him play before?" At the NFL Combine, he had the 61-mile-per-hour max velo throw that was one beneath the record for that Joe Milton tied of Josh Allen's. And then, so you have, and then, on his film, it's all over the place. This is the first thing that Debro and I were talking about before our quarterback episode. This is right before Valentine's Day. When it's so fun for me when Debro goes in and he starts watching the dudes because he doesn't have the context, and so to get the call from him and then start talking about it, and then to find out that he loved McCarthy as well. And the crazy thing about it with regards to McCarthy and me and Debro's take on him, we independently came to the same comp on him. Usually it's either I'm stealing more often. I'll steal the one from Debro. Sometimes he'll steal the one.
I love your honesty right now, Thor. I love your honesty.
The first time I gave the Rich Gannon comp to JJ McCarthy was because I've been pressed in public at this thing that I was doing. And then a day or two later, Debro could not have heard that, and I didn't put it out anywhere else. He calls me. He's like, "I got my JJ McCarthy comp. It says the same name, Rich Gannon." Now that's, of course, Rich Gannon at his apex. And Rich Gannon, he was a guy that got drafted in the 4th round, got traded to the Vikings, but it took him a long time. He didn't get his chance until later on. It was a little bit of a different era. JJ McCarthy, it is the opposite end of the developmental curve. He just won the national title again for an NFL head coach in a pro-style system. that is very similar, at least in terms of the 12 personnel. Maybe not on the early down stuff, but the 12 personnel and different stuff they do like that. Very, very similar. Won the national title there, very successful at Michigan, and then going all the way back to high school. I think this is a kid who can come in and play right away. I know the Vikings with Darnold, they may give him Darnold September, but JJ McCarthy is one of those guys that can come in and play right away. And he's a guy who is going to, I'm not going to put this one out, but for Vikings fans, I'll just say what Gus Johnson said when JJ was playing. I think it was Maryland or one of those teams. He had this crazy scramble around, and Gus Johnson yelled out, "Hello, Fran Tarkenton." And sometimes when he is scrambling around, you see some of that, at least for someone in Minnesota. But I think Rich Gannon is the more one for people to evoke in recent times.
It's a good thing Debro's on here now, because Erickson thought Fran Tarkenton was the person from The Nanny. So just so you know that. Let's get to the next pick here. The New York Jets do not take Brock Bowers. Alu Fashanu, Penn State tackle, is instead off the board. So they did not take Brock Bowers. That did not happen. Thor, your take on Alu Fashanu here, as the New York Jets try to protect Aaron Rodgers a little bit more here in what is the let's try it, take two, and see if it works.
Indeed, right? Yeah, and the guy, the guy that we know of, outside of Alt, this was the guy who is the dead red left tackle projection that you really trust in pass protection. Last 2 years at Penn State, Alu Fashanu allowed 0 sacks. It is that other half of his game that we were talking about before, the run game aspect. But in the NFL, obviously the passing game is far more valuable. That is what made Fashanu a valuable asset. He's also just an interesting guy in terms of, the feel that he has for pass protection, not apparent in the run game, and physical dimension wise. For people out there that read or that don't read, but the Bob McGinn piece that he does every year where he goes through the different positions and he talks to NFL scouts and he lets NFL scouts make all these comments about the guys and gives them anonymity. It was fascinating looking at their quotes about Alu Fashanu, because they couldn't get over how long he was with how small his hands were. Alu Fashanu comes into the NFL with the smallest hands on an offensive tackle who was 6'6" or above, with the arm length that he did in history. Now, does that mean anything? Probably not. But they were calling him a Tyrannosaurus Rex, and that the NFL scouts, sometimes they have bouts of cleverness. But I think in terms of the value of the slot, a little bit higher than I would have gone, but he had other interested teams around the NFL that were interested in him. So if you want a Fashanu, this is probably the time you had to pop him.
Well, it might be the time to pop quarterbacks, because the Denver Broncos are staying put here with the 12th pick, and it looks like the selection is going to be Bo Nix. I told you it was going to be a fun night one. I thought there'd be some more trades. But we got Penix in the top 10. We got Bo Nix in the top 12.
Yeah.
All the feels, as the kids say. So,
yes.
Debro, let's get your take on Bo Nix, which seems to be Sean Payton's guy. How do you think that's going to work out for the Denver Broncos?
Well, first of all, I'm a man of my word. I will shout out Mike Mayer on this one. Yes, the over 4.5 quarterbacks did hit. There you go, Mayer. I said I would do it. I did it.
No, you have to give a public apology. I didn't hear the word. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, Mike Mayer.
I'm
very sorry. Here's your public. Thank you, Thor, for so much. It's like Mayer's on the show right now with us. I love this. God, I hate you so much. No, okay. So anyway, Bo Nix. I look, Denver, congrats. You got your Kenny Pickett. This is just when NFL teams get backed into a corner and they get forced to pick quarterbacks that should not go in the first round. This is how you enter NFL franchise quarterback purgatory. Pittsburgh did it a few years ago. Now, welcome to Denver. They don't have many pass catchers. It's okay. The one thing I will say about this, and Erickson and I laughed about this on the landing spot episode, and I'm going to bring this up right now. Wheels up Jaleel McLaughlin, baby, because he's going to get all the checkdowns he can for Mr. Bo Nix. So I'm here for that. The rest of it, oh, dear. All I can say is, Denver Broncos fans, I'm sorry. This is a bad pick.
It's not gonna go well. Look,
not gonna end well.
Tough one here for me, Thor, because I can't shake the years of Auburn Bo Nix out of my head.
Yeah,
that's where I always
you
struggle.
Shouldn't.
And I guess, for some who are late to the game here with Bo Nix or didn't watch him struggle mightily there in the SEC, look, Bo Nix had all of the helium of every big quarterback prospect you could possibly imagine. I'm waiting for Spencer Rattler, by the way, to go next year, the way things are going on the draft. But
maybe Joe Milton should get ready.
Why not? I mean,
why
we
not?
got Nix and we got Penix.
Why not?
Why not?
I knew tonight was going to be crazy. This is next level.
Yeah, but we thought it would be trades crazy, not people staying put and getting
We thought
crazy.
it'd be crazy, but at least make some kind of sense. This draft is already drunk, man.
Well, we knew
it's
that
off
Bo
the
Nix.
rails.
We drafted a couple times where Bo Nix was the selection here. I feel
nobody on this show made those selections. I'll say
the
that.
royal we.
The
but
royal
back to
we.
Bo Nix.
Yeah.
Again, my inability, Thor, to shake the years of Auburn out of my head is where I struggle. Look, when he makes that transfer to Oregon, he gets dropped in front of a mammoth offensive line. He's got all the time in the world. He's got offensive weapons galore. He's got an easier conference to play in. He looked better. Now the question is, which version do you believe in is the real Bo Nix?
Yeah. So, and the Auburn thing is what it is. He badly struggled there. And then, of course, he goes to Oregon. And I will give him credit for the improvement. But the argument that I've made, and to me, this is very apparent on his film when you watch the Oregon stuff, is the things that he struggled with at Auburn are not things that he has fixed. They are things that the Oregon system inoculated him from very cleverly. And that was like, we talk about this when we talk, Debro and I talked a lot about Javon Baker, this process, the UCF receiver who now plays in the Gus Malzahn offensive system. Of course, Gus Malzahn was the coach at Auburn when Bo Nix was there. Javon Baker has that really high A-dot because in that Gus Malzahn system, you sit back in the pocket a bit and then they have the downtown shots. What you saw at Auburn was Bo Nix, first of all, badly struggled with the ones where it was the true looks down the field, but also just standing in the pocket there, going through the progressions. It was never extremely fluid with that. You saw a lot of mistakes made with the decisions that he was making. And then denoting the pass rush in addition to making those decisions with the bullets flying around him. He didn't have to do any of that stuff at Oregon. Most of the offense, and when I say most, I'm barely exaggerating on this, a metric ton of his production was behind the line of scrimmage, right? Over 25% plus. And that's where the accuracy comes from. I think last year behind the line of scrimmage, something like 125 for 127. And then people want to tell me he's the most accurate quarterback in this class. And it's like, if an NBA player only shot layups, and he had a better shooting percentage than Steph Curry, would you say that he's a better shooter than Steph Curry? So it was like that stuff. The pre-delineated read in that system, what they do, they ask Bo Nix to count the numbers on the side, right? And based on where the defensive numbers are against the spread system that Oregon had, the answer to where he was going with the ball was spoon-fed to him in advance before the ball was snapped. I'll give him the credit for he's very good at reading the defense before the snap. I saw a couple cool things with him last year at Utah. They had Utah had a single high safety look. It was a weird defensive formation to be in spread. The safety comes down to the line of scrimmage, and it was really weird. Bo Nix saw it right away. This is before the snap, starts going nuts, runs up to the offensive line. He's like, we're doing something different, because he knew that Utah was in man coverage and they did not have anyone deep, and that no one would be running with his running back if he simply just switched the play to, hey, Bucky Irving, stand to the left of me as opposed to the right, and just run straight down the field. I'm going to throw a lollipop to you. There will be no one else around you. They got a free touchdown. You do see some stuff like that on his college film. It's just in the NFL, you are not going to get the freebies like that. And the more troubling thing with Bo Nix is after the snap, when the bullets are flying and you're supposed to be going through these reads in that Oregon system, it was spoon fed to him where to go with that ball. Numerous times on his film, I saw guys streaking wide open downfield, and he just did not see them whatsoever because he was locked in on that one look that he had decided upon in advance. That is pretty troubling for a guy 5 years out of high school that played that entire time, who's not going to give you the athleticism out of the pocket. He needs to win from within the pocket. I don't see him challenging defenses with his arm. I never saw him beat defense with his arm. In fact, I think that his entire game could be described as risk averse. Even when he had free looks down the field, there was any chance that he thought, well, maybe the defensive back would be able to make a play. Like, I don't have the arm strength to do the oomph throw on a line down the field. He would lollipop it towards the pylon so that the defensive back had 0% chance to intercept it, but he would turn touchdowns into incompletions in this way. I hate this pick. To me, Bo Nix was a third round guy, middle of the third round, maybe even slightly towards the latter part of the third round. This is pretty egregious. But yeah, we saw the smoke with Sean Payton and Bo Nix. I just would have traded down to do this. And if you lost out on him, who cares? Like, literally, who cares? Yeah, go out and get somebody else. I just don't know what upside that they believe that they are seeing with this player.
Thor,
Raiders, sorry, 1 second here. The Raiders have made their selection, and it's a spicy one. It's Brock Bowers at 13.
Love it.
So there you go.
Wow.
Yeah,
here's the pivot here for the Raiders.
We were in crazy world for a little bit. Now we get back to sanity.
We were in crazy world for a little bit,
We're
but this
still
is really
in crazy
interesting
world
because you had all the quarterbacks go. So Penix was a guy that we thought, hey, if a team is going to take a shot on a quarterback, none of us would have faulted Penix to the Raiders. We saw it in the second round a lot in our mocks. In the first round, if it happened, that's perfectly fine. But now, really interesting, because what they've done here is taken the best offensive player on the board remaining, I think, in all of our opinions. Correct, gentlemen? You would agree with that? Yes?
Yes.
So they've done that. Now they have a player who is very difficult to guard in a division that obviously is in a little bit of a transition, I think. You know, you still got the Kansas City Chiefs at the top, but the Chargers are in a bit of a transition here. And now you have, again, a scenario where you can continue to grow Brock Bowers in this offense. You eventually will get the quarterback of the future. I don't know if anybody really thinks that what they have on their roster now is the quarterback of the future there. But what do you take out of this? I want to get Derek Brown sometime in here of the Brock Bowers, the Georgia tight end, now becoming a Las Vegas Raider.
We're still living in a crazy world. So basically the Raiders just said, yeah, that pick of Michael Mayer last year, just gonna burn that. Doesn't matter.
That's a great point.
Like,
so what do you make of that? Because now it's Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers, Mike Mayer, and Brock Bowers. So we're running 12 personnel here. Like, what are we doing?
We're gonna have to live in 12 personnel. Or here's the other part of this, Joe. Do we see Michael Mayer get traded at some point? And really, what that harkens back to is Antonio Pierce is saying, look. Not that maybe I don't hate Michael Mayer. He talked very highly of him last year, but obviously that was not a pick that Pierce was on board with. If they don't trade him, then yes, we're going to see them living in 12 personnel because, I mean, their depth chart right now would necessitate that. With Devontae Adams and Jacoby Myers, you don't have anybody of any kind of like truly high talent ilk behind them outside of now the tight end position. And now, yes, like, is Brock Bowers going BPA and taking him at this spot? Is, like, to your point, is he the best offensive skill player left on the board? Sure. But this is not a situation where it was Buffalo last year and, all the wide receivers have been taken, and now we're going to go with the best tight end as far as that situation. You're still going to line Bowers up. Now, yes, you have the versatility to line him up all over the place. But after the selection of Michael Mayer last year, this pick is just, we're still living in crazy land, man.
Speaking of crazy land, Thor, you're the draft expert around these parts. Have we ever had 13 straight picks of offensive players?
I can't imagine.
I just had that
first defensive player is still alive, baby.
Gotta be a record.
First defensive player is still alive, right?
I mean, probably still going to be live after New Orleans too.
We are 13.
Yeah, because they're going to go tackle. I mean, almost assuredly they go offensive line help of. Yeah,
but I'm just sitting here looking at the board and I'm going offense. I
mean, we knew it was going to be 8, 9, maybe 10, or like maybe 11 at worst. But now we're down to 14, and like you guys say, it seems like we're going to get down to 15. So this is pretty crazy.
Well, to that point, is this also a reflection, like we've talked about? Like last year or previous quarterback classes, the quarterbacks drop. That's a reflection of the quarterback class. Is this also, and no shade to Verse and all these guys, but at this point, all of these defensive edges falling down the board, is this also a reflection of this edge class? Like these guys falling down the board? Because nobody thought that would be the case.
Well, I mean, let's just call it what it is. Thor, it is. Is it not? How could it not be?
Yeah, and I'm curious what the NFL got on the medicals of Latu, and we'll probably have a better idea of that leaving tonight. We'll see, where he ends up going. But yeah, there was some rumors about that at the very end of the process when we hadn't heard much before that. Sometimes that can be a little bit ominous. You guys know this, I was lower on Dallas Turner, I think, than anybody out there. So I see that sort of stuff, but still a little bit surprising. And obviously the reason that this has happened is because two teams that play in not in the same division, but two teams on opposite sides of the conferences decided to make egregious decisions with draft equity with regards to the quarterback position, beyond what you usually see as mistakes there. We got our Christian Ponder pick in Bo Nix, and Penix, I don't want to crap on Penix because I did have him as a early second round guy. And a part of that is the medicals. And a part of it with Penix is, even though he tested as the athleticism being there, and I saw it earlier in his career when he got to leave the pocket, I don't care that he ran the 4.5 and that he still has that athleticism, because you're not going to let him leave the pocket the same that Kalen DeBoer didn't that second go around those last 2 years at Washington, because he gets injured. That's what Kalen DeBoer found when he was out there running around. Michael Penix reliably would get injured. You have to protect him by leaving him back there. But anyway, either way you see his game is a reach. That is what has pushed these defenders down, and we'll see what New Orleans does here. But yeah, the first defender, it may be 15, or we'll see.
Thor, I give the Raiders a lot of credit here for taking Brock Bowers. Forget the fact that you took Mike Mayer last year.
Yes.
That's the best player on the board. He is a game changer on offense. I think the Raiders did a really good job here of not panicking and saying, oh, but we already did XYZ last year. That talent's on the board. You select that talent and you deal with it as you go. And look, maybe there will be a team interested in Mayer. There's some teams looking for tight end help, and certainly he is a prospect still worthy of potential. But regardless, I guess the question is now, Brock Bowers with this current quarterback situation in Las Vegas, what do you make of that for him in 2024?
Well, first of all, I would have suggested to Sean Payton, if you want to improve your passing game, short and intermediate, take friggin' Brock Bowers. Okay? Instead you're going to take a guy that you're not going to want to re-sign after his rookie deal, but I digress. As far as Bowers go, totally agree with the way that you set that up, Joe. It's like, with the Josh Rosen thing going back to the Cardinals, and then they moved on right away. You can't be beholden to that. But in addition to that, I will say they're two totally different kinds of dudes. So they absolutely could play on the same field together. Mayer is your classic inline dude. He gets after it blocking. Bowers gives you effort as a blocker. It's just you would never let him do it on a passing down, because then you'd be depriving the terror that you can do to the defense on that by deploying him out there and potentially getting him the ball. For the Raiders, the quarterback situation being what it is, especially, oh my gosh, is this guy going to help? Right? Like the guys that they're going to, Minshew or whatever, what is he good at? It's just getting the ball out right away, right? Like in the short and intermediate, doesn't have the howitzer, yada, yada. He's just going to get the ball off short to Bowers and see all this yak yardage just accumulate on his passing ledger. Minshew is going to love him. And the offensive efficiency of Las Vegas just spiked, right? You just injected steroids into it with Brock Bowers. And talking about his acclimation to the NFL, like we were talking about early, because people are like, oh, a tight end is it's slow to acclimate. And I cannot stress enough, you can't think of Brock Bowers as a traditional tight end, number one. And number two, recall the context of Brock Bowers steps on to campus in Athens, Georgia, right out of high school, for a team that would go on to win 2 of the 3 next national titles. And they would have had a shot to at least try to three-peat had Alabama not narrowly beat them in the SEC title game this past season. Brock Bowers immediately went on that team as a true freshman, was their number 1 wide receiver, and then did it again and again all 3 years. The Mackey twice, the first team All-American 3 times. Then he goes to the NFL, and those teams had really good receivers, NFL caliber receivers, obviously, and they were obviously trying to win. Brock Bowers is going to go into the NFL right away, and he is going to put up stats like better than the guy Kincaid and different stuff like that, just because the manufacturing of the touches for him. And I think NFL fans are going to like the random rushing utility that you can get from him once or twice a game, just to keep the defense off, guessing and whatnot.
Talise Fuaga, tackle from Oregon State, off the board next for the New Orleans Saints. D-Bro, that's your New Orleans Saints. So how do you feel about this selection of Fuaga?
I love it. They needed to go warm body at offensive line. They have needs at both tackle positions. They have needs at guard, the entire offensive line, which if you were to talk about any or start a conversation about the Saints before last year, within the last 5 to 10 years, the first conversation about the strength of that team would have been the offensive line. But age and injuries have really taken a toll. Andrew Speed has played out of position at them asking him to play tackle over the last few years when he was a guard. Really didn't work out. Ryan Ramczyk now having a lot of problems coming back from injury and stuff. I don't even know if we see him play this year. They had to take an offensive lineman, and I love this selection. I mean, really for me, it was Fashanu or Fuaga. Give me an offensive lineman that has talent that can block, because we know Derek Carr. I'm not saying he's Sam Darnold, but he sees ghosts every now and then.
All right. Our boy, Mike Mayer, who we give a lot of crap to, he actually is working very hard tonight, as he always does. Previous record, he just filtered this to me. Previous record for most offensive players to start a draft was 7 in 2011. We are now at 14 and counting, folks.
Wow.
So
baby.
I don't know if
I
don't know if the NFL broadcast picked that up or not. I'm watching it on mute here as we go, as we are going through the draft here, but I picked it up, and it is stunning, and it just tells you kind of where the league is. So mamas, raise your children to be offensive tackles. I think that's the
don't raise them to be running backs.
And boy, is that a big one right there, and Mr. Fuaga, and at a position of desperate need for the Saints. Why do every single time, you guys remember we did the mock drafts every single week on the Fantasy Pros YouTube channel? Every single time it was like the free spot was the Saints with the tackle. Sometimes we had different guys there. Fuaga we had there quite a bit, but it was going to be tackle. They were another team, sort of the NFC's version of what we talked about earlier with the Titans, just in terms of how rancid their projected starting tackles were in the moment. So the Saints had to do something. They had made some mistakes at that position in past drafts. Trevor Penning, and I won't get into the whole laundry list for our New Orleans fans that are out there. But this pick is really good, because even though Fuaga, he's going to play right tackle, he's another dude who is not going to play left, but he is going to be a very, very good right tackle. The reliability, the power, that he's another hammer in the run game kind of a guy. The reliability and the high floor, I think in particular, is something that attracted New Orleans in terms of buying, because they cannot go all next season with the two guys that they have projected as starting tackles heading into tonight.
All right, we're going to continue to keep you up to date here live as the Indianapolis Colts are on the clock. I'm fascinated to see where the Colts go from here. D-Bro, any predictions here where the Colts go so close to getting Bowers? Oh, man, would I have loved that. With Shane Steichen, that would have gotten me very excited here, but he is no longer on the board. I'm surprised nobody even traded up when Bowers fell that far, but
yeah.
By the way, some other news, it appears that Kirk Cousins was not given the heads up that the Atlanta Falcons will be taking Michael Penix. So
trouble in paradise.
Coles is not happy.
Arthur Blank.
Happy.
Trouble in paradise.
Arthur Blank, just win for that man, please. All he wants to do is just have a winning team. He tries so hard, but yeah, we'll see what happens here. So predictions here, Indianapolis Colts with what's remaining on the board, in your opinion, D-Bro.
So first of all, I'm very happy that Bowers did not go at 12th, because I had tickets plus money for the under 11.5 and the over 12.5. So I was like, as long as he doesn't go to Denver at 12, I'm a happy person. So that cashed. But we're, again, talking about bets we've already made for the NFL draft. I'm going to go exactly where I've been, and that's Brian Thomas Jr. I think they go wide receiver here. And really, you look at Shane Steichen's offense, we need to have a wide receiver that can allow us to have explosive plays. And Alec Pierce was not that guy. He just could not do it last year. I think they add a wide receiver and a guy that can get downtown. I think it's either Brian Thomas Jr. or Xavier Worthy with this pick. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's where I'm going.
Thor, your thoughts on D-Bro's predictions?
In general or this one? I think it'd be the same. I disagree and
Oh, interesting. Where are they going then, Thor? Come on, crystal ball.
I think we're gonna get the first defender here. If I had to guess, Brian Thomas, the fit as far as what with Anthony Richardson in the field stretcher is what I was seeing earlier in the process. I think it would be a good fit, but recall the past couple of days this week, we have heard concerns about his medicals. There have been reports about that he got flagged on that. The Colts medical staff would have to be very confident in their read on clearing Brian Thomas to take him here, because this would be a pretty bullish slot to take Brian Thomas, even though he's a great fit.
Speaking of medicals,
we have pick in for the Colts. Go ahead, D-Bro, since you
they just take Michael Penix again. He's off the board.
By the way, when you go back and watch this, I'm sure we've got to get social media to clip that. The reaction of Thor to the Michael Penix selection is all time deer in the headlights. Just amazing.
I tried to take a picture of it.
It should be your X, your Twitter, like front page.
I have to say two things about what were happening in that moment. I had like another tab, and I slowly brought it down to see who that pick was, and I almost had a heart attack because I saw QB in the Falcons slide, and I was like, these idiots, they just signed Kirk Cousins and now they just stole JJ from me. Right. Like, and it was like, at least that pick would have made more sense, but still it's like, then why did you sign Cousins? And then I saw Penix and I was like, no, that's, I was just like, I had like the bitter beer face, probably, I assume.
No, it was this. That's pretty much it. It was amazing.
And then I saw the text
in my brain.
I saw the text populate, as if like a apparition, coming out of the water. Not a typo in one of the cells, because our boss Mike Mayer is behind the scenes keeping the running thing going. Because I would not have believed it otherwise, and he put it in all capital letters. So it was like, I guess that's what happened.
We're going to continue to go through here. So the Colts selection is now official here. Things are flying fast and furious. It's Laiatu Latu, UCLA, edge rusher. So the streak is broken. The edge rusher is officially there. Good selection for the Colts. D-Bro, you say you love it. Why?
I love it because I just cashed Laiatu Latu at plus 170 to be first defender. I had tickets on Quinyon Mitchell and Latu, so I'm a happy camper, even though I was wrong on that prediction. So Thor, you get your flowers, you're right, and I get to line the pockets a little bit.
I didn't hear I'm sorry in that one either. But
no, you're not getting that. Nope, you're pushing it too far. You're not getting that. John, can we get Thor off the show? I think he needs a break right now, John.
It's coming up soon. What we're going to do is we're going to bring Andrew Erickson back. We're going to let him take a short monologue here regarding the Bo Nix selection, maybe a few other selections. We get his take on that, but yeah, so we'll definitely get that. But in the meantime, D-Bro, let's take about this edge rushing selection here for the Colts, and then we'll get Thor's break in here too in just a second. But again, let's talk about Latu here, the newest member of the Indianapolis Colts.
I mean, I love the selection. I think Latu, it was an easy hands down, and Thor and I have been talking about this off air. I mean, Latu, I think he was the easy defensive edge one here. And for a team that Indy struggled to rush the passer last year. So this definitely fills a need. And obviously, if they're willing to select him this high, the medicals could have came back good, or at least the team was comfortable selecting him here. So I like the pick by Indy. And if anything, we could make a case, if the medicals are clear for Latu, this was a really good value for a player that I could have seen him go as high as 8 or 9 to Atlanta. Well, that didn't happen. Or the Bears. So to get him at 15 and they didn't have to trade up to do so, good pick.
All right, Thor, your take on Latu here at 15.
Yeah, my take on the top edges was as long as Latu's medicals were, your medical team was okay with that, okay-ish. Obviously, the medical retirement while he was at Washington playing for Jimmy Lake with the neck. Then he comes back, he transfers to UCLA, back out on the field. Last 2 years, he was absolutely dominant. You just look at the play on the field the last 2 years, and then the athletic profile in the package. Clearly, he is the best edge rushing prospect in this class. The only question with it was the medicals on it. The Colts obviously feel good enough about that, and that's if their medical, because none of us stayed at the Holiday Inn Express last night, so we don't know. But like if the doctors told us that there is not an elevated risk of injury reoccurrence with Latu, or they don't feel that there is an elevated risk that his career is going to be cut short because of this, he is absolutely the dude that you take here. The past 2 years, the pressure rates that he put up, the sack rates at UCLA, like I said, just utterly ridiculous. And then in addition to the athleticism that he has and that profile and the productivity, the pass rushing repertoire that he has and the moves, the counter moves, the fluidity and the speed that he gets to those counter moves, it's like like when I write, Debro knows this because he'll call me and I'll be writing. And then when I pick up, he hears my music, like usually it's Eminem. But like if I'm doing like the mix of it, if I don't like the song, I'll just keep hitting forward. That is Latu when he is coming forward. If the offensive tackle shuts down his first plan, okay, we're going to the next one, shuts that down. He just keeps hitting the fast forward. He'll just keep going. He is relentless with that, and eventually he will free himself. That's why he accrues these ridiculous numbers. As long as his body doesn't betray him in the NFL, he will be a star, and it's not a surprise to me that he ended up being the first defender off the board.
All right, so the first defender's off the board. We're going to bring back Andrew Erickson. Before we do, I want to remind everybody we've got some fun stuff going on here at Fantasy Pros. The FFPC is live and well. Fantasy Pros Championship drafts are happening right now. We are live. For $350, you can enter. If you go to fantasypros.com/FFPC, use that promo code FantasyPros to sign up. $25 off your first entry into this amazing tournament. $1 million first prize is at stake in the world's largest online season-long tournament. The early bird discount, too, is still going if you register by June 15th and draft your team by June 30th to receive a free $35 team credit. So you get that, and then you get the Fantasy Pros code, and you get $25 off your first entry to Fantasy Pros Championship Series. Win $1 million playing fantasy football. Seems pretty good to me. Andrew Erickson, I'm going to give you the stage here because you've been off in the distance, off into the green room. So let's talk to you here for a moment, if we will. Your thoughts on Bo Nix and the Denver Broncos, because that's what's got everybody all hot and bothered right now.
I've been off in the green room making social shorts. Just go check those out on the social media platforms for Fantasy Pros. So Bo Nix, it was inevitable that this was going to happen. Just that Sean Payton's got to get his guy and had to draft him at 12 overall. So no, I get they have to draft a quarterback. So they kind of put themselves in this position. It's like they could have found a way to maybe finagle, try to trade back, get picks. But ultimately, like Sean Payton was too convinced that he had to have Bo Nix to be his quarterback. So I don't love the pick. I'm not thrilled about it. So that's something that I think that Debro is pretty accurate with the Kenny Pickett comparison. I think that's who Thor has compared to Bo Nix as well, is Kenny Pickett. And it's just like, why are we, what are we doing here? Like, how long is this contract going to last? So Bo Nix to Denver, not super enthralled by that. I feel like I missed so much just in the last 30 minutes, but the Latu pick, I think that he's a good pass rusher, graded really well for PFF when he's been healthy. I do prefer, I kind of wish I went corner though. Queen Mitchell's on the board, CB1 in my opinion. So I think that would have been kind of an interesting pivot. I gave them a draft grade B, not an A. I think that I would give them an A if it was Mitchell instead of Latu, but I'm kind of picking at straws there. It's not too bad. Fuaga for the Saints, I think, is a great pick. They needed a tackle, so I like that. I'm not as high on Brock Bowers as my colleagues are. Maybe it's my fantasy mind that's kind of taken over, but it's Luke Getsy. Are we super happy about Luke Getsy landing Brock Bowers to turn him into this super dynamic slot receiver tight end? So I get adding another offensive weapon for Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. sure. I guess I'm not really sure what this Raiders team is doing. So I get adding a good, I think in real life, yeah, probably makes sense to add Bowers, but now is it Bowers, Mayer, Adams, Myers? Like, where does Bowers kind of fit in that offense? Like, how is Luke Getsy going to make this work? Like, I'm very intrigued by that. So we'll see how things shake out. But Seattle, Byron Murphy the second. I do like that though, even though he's the second defender off the board. So
Finally, some more defense. Poor IDP players. They're just out there going, can we get a player? Can we get somebody? But you can't fault the Raiders for doing what they did. Bowers is there. You pull the trigger, you take Bowers, and you figure it out later. You just keep acquiring talent on your roster. That's how you do it. It's the same as a fantasy draft. I always say this to people. There's always going to be room for trades. There's always going to be a later pick that you hit on that you didn't expect to. But when certain talent presents itself, even if you already have, well, I already took a receiver, so why should I take the second great receiver? Well, you do it because they're great. You take greatness and you figure it out later. That's what you got to do. Fantastic stuff there from Andrew Erickson, as always. And yes, the Seattle Seahawks are on the clock, and Byron Murphy is going to be the selection, it seems like that. As we continue to kind of step back so far, we are now officially halfway through the draft. Who is the biggest winner in your opinion so far tonight? Is it the Bears with the 2 selections they made? Is it Thor Nystrom, who got his quarterback? Who's the big winner in your opinion of so far the first half of this draft, the way it's gone?
the biggest winner, I think it's hard to argue with the Bears, having 2 first-round picks. And, I mean, sometimes when teams have multiple picks, it doesn't look good. Like, I feel like we've seen a number of Browns drafts where they have a bunch of first-round picks and they come out with squad. You're like, wait, what happened?
Or the Carolina Panthers.
Or the year the Raiders had a bunch of first-round picks, and then they drafted Cleveland Farrell. And it was like, wait, what are we doing here? They drafted a running back. So it's not always a guarantee that having a lot of picks guarantees that you'll actually get something. I mean, it was chalk at the top. I mean, I guess the Falcons thing is obviously the thing that sticks out like a sore thumb. Michael Penix going 8th overall, and then the announcement that Kirk Cousins. That's just really weird to me. Like that part where they don't tell Kirk Cousins this. Like, why would you not do that? Like, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Even if, like, again, I tried to defend the pick, or at least more so than Thor did, and I get it. Like, it's hard to look at this like, oh, this is a great pick by the Falcons, like Michael Penix. But the fact that they didn't like even let Kirk Cousins know about it, I don't know if they're like trying to like, hey man, better make sure your Achilles is really healed.
Better start stretching, buddy. The live reaction to Kirk Cousins was, "Gee whiz, gosh, that sure wasn't very nice." I'm sure that was the reaction.
But I think Thor mentioned this too. I think that it's probably the Vikings, how they got McCarthy without, again, at least I'm reading. I don't know do we know what the trade details were?
Mike, maybe you can get us the exact trade details real quick of that. We saw it flash real quick, but I don't think we got a chance to really break it down on a graphic or anything.
I would imagine they didn't trade their other first round pick.
Thor took his little break there, and apparently the Vikings are back on the clock. They just traded up to 17 for the next pick. So after Seattle makes this selection, we'll try to give you the details of what that trade was with the Jets, where they swapped there, and also what they're doing to go up to 17 and what they're going up for. So I can only assume that's why Thor got up and took his little break so he could go and make a call to the GM and say, hey, I see something on the board you need to go do, don't you know? And you can make sure you make that pick there for you, fella. All right, so let's go to Byron Murphy, Texas defensive tackle. He is officially off the board. Your thoughts on Murphy, the first tackle, and what Seattle gets here on the defensive side of the football.
I really like that pick for Mike McDonald taking over for Seattle. I think they needed to address the trenches, and I thought that they would go with the defensive line. And Byron Murphy's, I think, the best defensive tackle in the draft. Gives them another dynamic piece, interior pass rusher that they need. So I really like the pick. I thought that he could be the first defender. He was a second defender, unfortunately, but again, not a lot of defense here. Just like in the real NFL, not a lot of defense. Yeah. So I like that pick. It's an A for me.
Well, I don't think it was an extraordinarily talented defensive class compared to some other years past. There wasn't this, oh my God, you got to get this corner. Oh my God, you got to get this edge rusher kind of guy out there. There's no Myles Garrett in this class. So I understand that. And it's the same way you look at the running backs in this class. You say there's no Jahmyr Gibbs or Bijan Robinson, the guy that's going to be a stud right away. The details of that earlier trade that we had the Vikings making right now, which is the number 11 overall pick, the 4th and the 5th rounder to the Jets, And in turn, the Jets moved that 10th overall pick. So that was to jump one spot and pick number 203 overall. And yes, whenever you do Thor imitations, it's a combination of Macho Man Randy Savage, but if he lived in Fargo, North Dakota. So you got to go, oh, yeah, sure, don't you know? Yeah, Vikings took JJ McCarthy. Yeah, oh, sure did, fella. So you got to say weird words like fella and don't you know? That's what you got to do. Now, Erickson, you are pumping your fist. I can only assume that's because of who the Vikings might be taking at 17.
That is correct. They took Dallas Turner, the Alabama edge rusher,
Mm-hmm.
who was mocked to be the first edge defender in almost every single mock draft. And in my final mock, I put Dallas Turner to the Vikings at 23 because I didn't know where to put him. I was like, I don't know. I'll just take a shot on Minnesota and Dallas Turner, not knowing that they would trade up to get him, trade back to get him. Didn't know if they would take him at 11 or 23. I was like, I know Dallas Turner is going to go in the first round. The Vikings have 2 first-round picks. Seems like a good bet to make. So that's what I did, and it worked out.
Yeah, it sure did. Nolan Jones, the comp that Thor had for him. Jones obviously just got drafted. Oh, excuse me, Nolan Smith, pardon me. Nolan Smith last year, who was drafted, and Dallas Turner is the comp there. Alabama boy, Dallas Turner now off the board. I was looking at some of the other comps here too. The Bo Nix comp from Thor was Kenny Pickett. Let's hope that goes a little bit better for the Denver Broncos.
Kenny Pickett career too.
It could be a few other comps here to throw out too. Is again, this board is up there right now. Thor's top 500 on FantasyPros.com. He's got comps for every single player, so that is pretty staggering right now. The work that this man does, take advantage of it. Go check it out at FantasyPros.com. It is there along with a lot of other draft articles, and all the recaps will be there, including tomorrow night. We will be here for night 2 of the NFL Draft. Rounds 2 and rounds 3. Round 1 certainly has not been boring. It started out incredibly dull and chalk, and then stuff got real, as the kids like to say. And then stuff got very, very chaotic here. So Dallas Turner, fine selection. We'll get Thor's take when he rejoins us of this last selection here. But certainly a smart move here as the Minnesota Vikings trying to retool a little bit and kind of go back after it. Cooper DeJean still on the board. Quinyon Mitchell still on the board. No corners have been taken yet, which is kind of stunning because we've seen in the past, Andrew, that the NFL draft in recent years has very much valued cornerback play. If you don't have good corners, shutdown corners, it's really tough defensively in this league now because the wide receiver play is so off the charts right now, and the rules certainly do favor the wide receivers. Are you surprised that we haven't seen a corner go off the board yet as we are at pick 18?
A little bit. Again, the only team I really think, I think Vegas could have used a corner, but again, they valued Bowers as just the best player available. I think that Indianapolis could have gone with a corner instead of Latu. Minnesota, I do think edge was a bigger fit for them, so I think Dallas Turner pick was the right pick to make. I'm interested now to see so Jacksonville picking at now they move back to 23. They need a cornerback really badly, and there's still a lot of the top 2 guys, so I'd be interested. And the thing is, too, Philadelphia. They're another team that was rumored to be trading up for Quinyon Mitchell. Would not be surprised if they jump up a couple spots to either grab Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell at pick 22.
Do they even have to jump up? Because if you're looking at this right now, Cincinnati, you imagine, is going to go on the offensive line, just probably. Maybe wide receiver if there's a T. Higgins deal in the mix. The Rams, again, you don't know what the Rams are going to do necessarily. They could go for a defensive tackle. They could go wide receiver. Pittsburgh going on the offensive line. Miami probably in that defensive trenches. That's what you'd like to go. Philly could probably just stay put and probably get one of those 2 corners. Don't you think, Andrew?
I think so. But Howie, if he wants to be aggressive and make sure that he locks, I guess it's like, what's the harm of just giving up like a 4th round pick? We've talked about a lot. I'm sure Thor can hit on this as well. Like the depth of this class with the NIL and all those types of things with the college game, like the depth is not nearly as great as it's been in past years, I would say. Like, so when we get outside the top 150 players, it's like we're starting to see a wider gap in terms of the talent. So maybe these late round picks aren't necessarily as valuable as in other years. So, hey, I'll give you a 5th round pick or 4th round pick to move up 2 spots. Let's make a deal.
Thor, you left for a moment, and the next thing you know, the Vikings made a trade. So I can only assume you were part of this deal. So when you made the call to the GM, Was that what you wanted, Dallas Turner, the edge rusher from Alabama, on your squad?
We do these mock drafts for months, and we go through every iteration, every different, there was no scenario in the world where the Vikings came out of the first round on Thursday night with JJ McCarthy and Dallas Turner and their 2025 round 1 pick. Kwesi and crew are cooking tonight. They are sizzling the joint up right now. It's incredible that they keep that 2025 round 1 and take 2 guys that on a lot of boards were considered top 10 guys, top 12, maybe at worst. Pretty incredible. So the job that they're doing is pretty wild there. In Brian Flores' defense, he's going to have a lot of fun with Dallas Turner. I mentioned some nitpicks that I have about Turner's game, but I had him in terms of slot right here. He was 18 on my big board. This was the 17 slot. I have no problem with the value here, and particularly the fit on a team that desperately need edge rushing help and going into a Brian Flores defense where it's the blitzing, it's the attacking, it is the ethos of get after the quarterback as quickly as possible, because sometimes they're leaving, because they're delineating so many resources, the blitzing and turning up the heat, they'll leave guys on islands. Dallas Turner, he is that freak athlete with the super duper long arms. That's the thing that you love about his game, the really quick first step. I do like his long arm move as well, in addition to the things that he can do to beat offensive tackles with the athleticism. The thing that they're going to have to work with him on when he gets into the building is he should talk to Latu. Latu, his ability to go through all those moves and have the refinement of those moves. If Dallas Turner were to get that sort of polish to his game, he would be a star in the NFL. But that's the thing that you need to work on with him. But you have all the athletic attributes that you would possibly want on an edge rusher in Dallas Turner.
All right, the next selection is in. Before we get to it, just to recap exactly what the deal was. The Vikings moved up to 17. Jaguars get the 23rd pick, 157 in the 5th round, and a 2025 3rd round pick, and a 2025 4th round pick. So Jaguars, I guess, didn't see any value on the board they liked, decided they're going to just keep pushing things back. The Bengals pick is in, and it's Amarius Mims at 18. So, Thor, I don't know if this is a bit of a surprise to you or not. Again, this is a Georgia boy here on the offensive tackle side. So we said they were going to go with the offensive line. They did. Your thoughts on this selection of Amarius Mims for the Cincinnati Bengals?
Qualitatively on my board, it's just the slightest of reaches. I had Mims at 23 and the Bengals take him at 18. But I will say earlier on in the process, I had Mims even higher. And basically what I did in my evaluation, I'm pretty bullish on Mims. But the risk with him, first of all, he only started 8 games in college. That's risk one. He was really good in them, including against some NFL players. Like that's so it goes sort of both ways with that. But then the thing that concerned me a little bit more, because for me, I'm okay with the 8-game thing because first of all, the guy in the package, he is almost 6'8", 340, and a 96 percentile athlete. And again, I saw him take care of NFL guys every time he got the chance. The thing that concerned me a little bit more was one of the reasons that he only played 8 games was because he had the lower body injury last season, required the tightrope surgery. Then he gets injured again during the pre-draft process, another lower body injury. I believe it was the hamstring at the combine. And it's for a guy who has those sort of unique dimensions and also has the quick twitch fibers as well, for it to be these lower body issues. That was more my concern. Just like, how is that body going to hold up? Just because we haven't seen it over the larger sample size. If it does hold up, this is a steal. It's not a reach at all. If his body holds up, like very few guys that go across from Amarius Mims are going to have trump cards on him from an athletic perspective. I haven't even mentioned that the guy's arms are, like he can touch both. It's like he can get in bed and shut off the lights at the same time. It's a cool Papa Bell. Like the length on that kid's ridiculous, which helps in pass pro. But coming forward, he is that load at right tackle and an enforcer.
It just warms my heart you made a cool Papa Bell reference here on the show. The old Negro Leagues player there who is so fast, they said, that he could turn the lights out on the switch and be in bed before it got dark. So great story. Andrew Erickson's not quite that fast. He's a little bit less than that. But Andrew, the fantasy impact here, obviously, is huge because Joe Burrow, when upright, is a guy who's going to the AFC Championship game. At the very least, it feels like. Joe Burrow, when not upright, well, we all know the end of that story and how it works for the Cincinnati Bengals. So what does this mean here for Joe Burrow, the selection of Mims? Thor just laid it out. If this guy's healthy, this is a steal here potentially, and if he can stay on the field. But again, that is huge too, because if he cannot, then we are spinning our wheels yet again in Cincinnati.
Well, the thing to also note is the Bengals signed Trent Brown to be their potential starting right tackle. So Trent Brown was the best tackle on the Patriots last year. So he can still start, and it gives them just more tackles to work with. So you have Trent Brown. He can start the season again, or if Mims can be the starter. Mims is a little bit inexperienced, but his upside is through the roof. So I like how they don't even necessarily need to slide in Mims day one. Okay, you got to be the right tackle from day one. We have Trent Brown. So we can use Trent Brown until he gets hurt, and then we can throw Amarius Mims in there. So I think it's a really good move. I think it's a really good fit for the Bengals and what they have. And look, the one team, again, in one of our early betting pros shows, we did futures. It was like, I'm betting on the Bengals. Like, that's what I am most excited about. So, yeah, I love the pick. Anything to keep Joe Burrow upright and on the field, let's go.
Still no corners off the board, but as Andrew was saying, we did a show on Betting Pros. We talked about early NFL futures. I'm sure after the draft, we'll see if anything changes there, but I'm with Andrew too. If the Bengals can get straight, they are a fantastic wager right now on the board. And don't forget, we're brought to you by Betting Pros today, this night one of the NFL draft. If you haven't already, download the Betting Pros app. Use the tools to start betting smarter, not harder. With us at Betting Pros, you can track all your bets. You can get expert analysis. You can also get the best thing in the world, which is getting the best line with the best projections out there too. So we take all the powers of Fantasy Pros, we put them into the betting world. It's the greatest tool suite you're ever going to find for betting. I use it, Andrew uses it, Thor uses it, Derek uses it. We all use it all the time. Every single day on the Major League Baseball show we do on our baseball show, I'm looking that thing up at the prop bet cheat sheet every single day. And let's just say yesterday was a good day for all of my Juan Soto bets. Well done, Juan. So if you want to be like us and be ahead of the game, use the Betting Pros app. It is spectacular. The team just done a phenomenal job putting it together. So go check that out and check out the YouTube channel too. Betting Pros, go subscribe there and subscribe here, because if you subscribe and drop a comment below, you could win a Cam Akers jersey. That's right. It's a college jersey, I believe, too. So that's good because we can all remember the better days of Cam Akers. But we're going to give away jerseys tomorrow as well on the program. We'll be here for night 2 of the NFL Draft, 6 p.m. Eastern tomorrow. Do not forget, make sure you subscribe to the channel and ring the bell for notifications so you know exactly what time we are going to be live here tomorrow with round 2. The Rams are up next. Andrew Erickson, any predictions here for the Rams at 19?
Maybe a wide receiver. I mean, if Sean McVay's sticking and picking, I
Lad
imagine
McConkey.
it's got to be an offensive player. I mean, I hope it's a wide receiver. This is okay. All my bets have flamed out so far, so I need something to work in my favor. So I hoping it's a wide receiver. Brian Thomas, Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman. I don't care. Come on, give me a receiver, please.
All right, Thor. I know you're happy and I'm happy because we both made a lot of money on JJ McCarthy. After the first betting show I did with you, your passion for the JJ McCarthy to the Vikings was so palpable that I had no choice but to bet it. And then as time went on, I bet it again, and I'm very happy I did, and that's why I listened to you, because you're the stud here. So, stud, the Rams are up. What should they do here? Who is the guy that fits this offense best here that's still remaining on the board?
I'll give you 4 words. Byron Murphy the third.
Okay.
That's who they should take right here. Aaron Donald retires. Byron Murphy, the best interior defensive lineman on the board by margin. We were talking about that earlier on.
Byron Murphy's gone.
Oh,
yeah.
He's gone.
I was going to say,
Seahawks.
you can't do that. The Seahawks took him while you were on your break.
when I was taking, okay.
All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to reset you. Thor.
Yeah.
Again, now listen carefully.
I totally missed that Seahawks.
Who's the best offensive player? I did say offensive player remaining here for Sean McVay's Rams. Go.
For the yeah. And sorry about that for people at home. I'm taking a break for that one slot, so I guess I missed that one. But
only takes one.
Always. We had heard the rumors in those couple hours leading up to the bell open for this evening, round 1, that the Rams were actively trying to get into the top 10. That ostensibly was for an offensive playmaker. This will be interesting, if they do go that offensive route, or could they go Johnny Newton, and try to plug that hole of Aaron Donald having left. But Brian Thomas, if the medicals have been cleared, again, that is the big question right now with Brian Thomas. That was late stuff that came off. But, you know, he would be one guy that I would consider if you were going to think about offense. But Johnny Newton would be, you know, for me is probably the guy that I'd be looking at.
All right, so you want Newton. I want Lad McConkey here. I'm not gonna lie. That's what
that would be fun.
It's neither. Everybody's wrong. It's Jared Verse. That is the selection at 19.
Okay, yeah.
So Thor.
Yeah.
Your reaction seems to be pretty positive of that.
That's a good pick.
Okay, sure. So why is it a good pick? Take us through.
Yeah, he's just so safe. Jared Verse 3 years ago was dominant at Albany. Albany's one of the better FCS programs, and then he wanted to prove the concept at the highest level. And then he was dominant the last 2 years at Florida State. I get that the whole thing with the stiffness thing. I totally get it. But his game and sort of the nitpicks that people gave about him, it reminds me a lot of Kayvon Thibodeau. And maybe you would say that Verse is a 95% version of that. But they're basically in the same physical dimensions. They basically had the same tests, and it's that same north-south convert speed to power locomotive coming in off the edge, the first step coming down, everything like that. I also like that Verse in run support. He's not one of those guys that just sells out to try to run around the offensive tackles. As a pass rusher, he will also set the edge as a edge defender against the run, funnel the guy back inside to help, does stuff like that. And a part of that is because he's been in, you know, college playing so many snaps. He gets nitpicked for this because it's like, you know, sort of the advanced age and different stuff like that in comparison to a guy like Dallas Turner at the same position. But I also think that there are elements of his game that are just further along and more fleshed out.
So is he like Thibodeau also, where he only has max effort like half of the games he plays?
No, he gives you more effort. So Thibodeau, maybe you would say, maybe Verse is like 93% of the natural ability, but maybe 110% of the other stuff.
There you go. Andrew Erickson, what do you think of this selection here? The edge rusher, Jared Verse from Florida State going to the Rams.
Again, I think the Rams could have used a corner more. Like, I still like Quinion Mitchell more than Verse.
Yeah, he is slid here.
Terran Arnold, I think, would have been a good pick, especially how the Rams value tackling in their secondary. Terran Arnold's a dog when it comes to tackling in the open field. So I don't know why no one wants any cornerbacks anymore. I mean, it's not like we play in a pass-happy NFL. I get you have to rush the passer. I understand that. But I was lied to about Sean McVay making his first-round pick to be offense. That was a lie because they went defense anyway. I don't know. I just think that, you know, again, I get they lost Aaron Donald, but you can't replace him. So I get you got to come up with some ways. You got to add some more pressure other ways. But I thought they would just go with secondary instead. And so I'm a little disappointed by that, but it's okay.
Thor, while you were on break too, I was saying to Andrew that there's a chance here Philadelphia is just going to stay put at 22 and possibly end up with Quinion Mitchell. Do you think that would be doing the happy dance there in Philadelphia if that happened?
The NFL has to stop letting Howie get away with this stuff.
I mean, really?
Howie Roseman just went to school at the Ozzie Newsome School of Drafting, where it's like I'll just accept whatever mistakes the NFL, the gifts that they get. It's just the dude that falls down every single time. It's every year. It's like, come on, NFL, stop it. Like, someone sniped the guy right beforehand, but it's like, because he doesn't care about the positions. He doesn't get myopic with the plan heading in. This is typically the mistakes that you see of decision makers during this process is they zero in on, we need this position or this position, and they just zero in on that. And they miss the opportunities that are falling to them. Howie Roseman just keeps his eyes wide open on it, just filter down. We'll accept it with wide open arms.
Well, Thor, let's do some predicting here. Pittsburgh offensive line, right? We've all been saying that. We think that's where they would go. Who would be the next logical guy who's left on the board?
Yeah, for me, Graham Barton didn't get picked when I took my
no.
Right, did he? Okay, good.
No. Oh, that would be fun. You became that guy in every fantasy draft. Is Mahomes gone?
No, Graham Barton for me is the best fit here because Pittsburgh has multiple needs across their offensive line in terms of their starting lineup for next year. And Graham Barton is a guy who has 5-position versatility, was awesome at left tackle the past couple of seasons at Duke, started his career at Duke as their starting center, was awesome at both the positions. And clearly he would be able to play guard. He's also a really, really good athlete. So I think that would be the best fit.
All right, so if he's the best fit, then let's go to the next selection here, which we've talked a lot about what Miami needs. Certainly defensive tackle, defensive line would help there, but maybe they go for a wide receiver or something like that. I don't think they'd be going corner necessarily. So again, it feels like a lock right now for the Eagles to be going corner potentially here. And Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell are both still on the board, Thor.
My boy Coop. And I'm just
Yeah.
praying that the thing with Miami is I badly want Miami to draft Xavier Worthy. Not necessarily because of any action I have, but just to put together the fastest wide receiving core by far in the history of the NFL. I just think it would be fun. But yeah, like as far as the cornerbacks, some of these teams sitting back here, Joe, like as you know, early on the cornerback, they fall. And those guys right now probably are not happy. They're, talking with their, like, why are we falling down so much? There are some organizations sitting back here that are thrilled, that have acute cornerback needs. They have needs in the secondary. And because of the way that this board has fallen, with the couple, we could argue, mistakes at quarterback that were made a little bit earlier. And then also all the offensive linemen that were going early on. Because of all that stuff, it has pushed down the cornerbacks, and teams. There's going to be a couple teams that get very lucky that had a cornerback need that we wouldn't have projected in advance that one of those top three cornerbacks were going to get to them.
All right, the pick is in for the Pittsburgh Steelers. We're going to get to that as soon as we can here. But this is definitely going to be it's been a crazy draft here. We had 14 straight offensive picks. We
double the record, right?
Double the record. We had Penix and Bo Nix both go in the top 15 picks.
Top 12.
Top 12. 12. Top 12 picks.
Y'all went ahead of Mac Jones.
We also had 5 quarterbacks go in the first 12 picks, which is also not a record, I don't believe, but certainly close to it, or at least tied. It has been for a draft that started off so chalky and so by the book for the first 4 picks. Stuff did actually for the first 5 picks. Let's be honest, things got crazy right after that. Things got a little nuts. All right, let's see what the Pittsburgh Steelers are going to do here and see what's going off here. It looks like Troy Fatanu is the selection here. So Thor, take us through your takes on this selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
This one is totally fine, and I have it's a good pick. The center one you can hit later because you can get a center that can come in and play right away on day 2. With Fatanu, the offensive tackles are going off fast and furious right now. He was one of the guys that was hanging out there. He ends up going a little bit lower than we thought. Mims gets sort of the seat upgrade on that, but with Fatanu, you're getting close to the end, the last stop on the train stop. What is the opposite manifestation of those cornerbacks or a couple of these other defenders that we did not expect to be available here right now? It's that the offensive lineman going earlier, Fatanu still being out there. The Steelers just plugged, I would assume, what they're viewing as one of their starting tackle holes going forward. But with Fatanu, he's that very interesting projection where he's just an eyelash under 6'4", but he has the arm length, he has the athleticism, and he also proved it on film last year in a big spot, the 15-game run to the college football national title game. It's not like he was playing cans every single week. He got to have some marquee matchups out there on the boundary in college, and acquitted himself well, was erasing people left and right.
Fatanu was actually your third tackle on the board. I'm looking at your top 500, and Rashawn Slater was your comp for him. That's pretty good there. So the selection for the Pittsburgh Steelers, Andrew Erickson, let's get your take in here. Certainly a need for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think you would agree.
Yeah, I like Fatanu. I think that he offers some versatility at guard and tackle, so the Steelers can kind of mix things up. It's crazy about how much the Steelers invested in their offensive line last year, and they were still so bad that they still need to keep drafting to improve their offensive line. So I think it's a good pick. Again, similar to like the Graham Barton pick, or if that had happened. Fatanu fell, I think, a little bit than we expected. I know that he had some medical red flags when it came to like a knee injury, so that may be the reason he's lasted this long till pick 20. But I mean, the Steelers were in a really good spot picking here with offensive linemen available, with all the receivers available, with the corners available. So they are probably pretty pleased that they were able to get Fatanu because there are a lot of good players left on the board. And I think, again, previewing this Eagles thing, I think you guys are right. I think Howie's just going to get Quinion Mitchell.
He is. He's going to get Quinion Mitchell. I mean, it's tremendous. And let's not forget, they've got more picks tomorrow. Like there's plenty more Eagles selections to be had in this draft. It is the John Harbaugh school too. Just take the best guy that falls to you every time, and that's how you stay at the top of the mountain at the back of the draft. It's a good place to be for the NFL teams like the Eagles and obviously like the Baltimore Ravens too. Let's talk about the Pittsburgh Steelers here, Erickson, for a second, because a remake of this offense is coming. We've got a new offensive coordinator. Arthur Smith takes over. Certainly, we all have opinions about that. Not one, but two new quarterbacks have come into town, Russell Wilson and Justin Fields. So what does the Steelers offense look like to you in 2024, Erickson? And from a fantasy perspective, should people be buying in on Wilson or should they be buying in on Fields?
I am going to buy in on Fields. I just can't imagine we're going to get enough of Russell Wilson playing at a high level for him to keep the job the entire year. And we know that Fields, not perfect, but he runs. Like even last year, how bad he was as a real quarterback at points, his low points, like he still was able to come back with extremely high highs, which we haven't seen from Russell Wilson in like 3 years. Like I think Russell Wilson is cooked, is toast. So I think it's going to be Fields sooner rather than later. And I think that what's telling about this pick too is there was a legit concern that the Steelers were going to draft a receiver in round 1. Now that hasn't really been their MO. They've usually been always scooping up value in a class this rich. It makes sense for them to do that, but that locks in George Pickens to be the straight up alpha in this offense. We saw him in the beginning of the year without Deontay Johnson put up wide receiver 1 numbers. We saw him put up wide receiver 1 numbers with Mason Rudolph. So this offense can function in some capacity, even if it's going to be more run heavy. I mean, George Pickens off play action, and he could do a lot of damage with guys that can actually throw the ball down the field. Like Wilson and Fields aren't perfect, but they sure offer way more upside as downfield throwers than Kenny Pickett ever did. So,
Thor, one of the comps, Elijah Vera Tucker, was just thrown out there for Fatanu. What do you think of that one?
I could see that. Yeah, that would be someone who's leaning more towards that. He's kicking into guard. Obviously, my Rashawn Slater one is suggesting more that I would like to see him given the shot to play tackle at the beginning because I think he can swing out there. And that would solve one of those whole acute needs that the Steelers have. And now the only thing the Steelers have to do is on day 2, go and get that center, okay? And now all of a sudden you turned around that entire offensive line. If you're able to do that, that would be a pretty incredible 2-step by Pittsburgh, turning what was a shoddy offensive line coming into tonight to tomorrow. Maybe they have started to turn that ship around on that unit.
All right, Miami is up next. So
Worthy.
So Worthy's what you want here.
Yeah.
I mean, certainly. That would certainly be obnoxious, right? I mean, you've got Devon Achane, you've got Jalen Waddle, you got Tyreek Hill, and then you're going to add Worthy. That seems like it's almost not fair. It's basically a track meet now in Miami.
Exactly. Yeah, let's see something that we've never seen before. You already had this receiving
defense. How about defense in Miami? You haven't seen that.
I don't care. Let's just do the shootouts every single time. You thought the team was fast last year. How about we had the fastest guy in NFL Combine history to it that shattered the record for the 40? I just think it would be really fun, but would certainly understand going somewhere else. I'm mostly, my rooting interest is obviously just for entertainment and fun. I just think it'd be crazy.
Well, the pick is in already, so obviously they know what they're doing.
Conviction.
Someone. Conviction is there. What do you think here, Andrew Erickson, if it is Worthy? What would that be like for the rest of the NFL?
One word, exhausting. Because all these defensive players are going to be so tired trying to catch all this speed, let alone in Miami's heat. Imagine having to chase guys that can all run sub 4.3 in like 90-degree weather in humid.
Yeah, too bad they always have to go to the playoffs in Buffalo or wherever else they have to go. So too bad the games that matter in December against,
Miami's always winning the offseason. They win regular season games.
Miami's great until Thanksgiving. And then when's that trade deadline? Week 12? That's where you start making the moves. Start making the moves there. But we shall see where they go. Is there a defensive play? In all honesty, though, looking at the board, Thor, I mean, we've been saying for a while that defensive tackle was certainly a need. Is there one you could justify here?
Yeah, for sure. We're getting someone take it. I better hold my comments because we're getting a pick at least on our live sheet. Yeah. But yes, there certainly would have been, and the Dolphins may be electing for speed and explosion of a different sort here, and addressing the need that you were sort of setting up there, Joe.
Okay. All right. Very good. So we'll await that new selection here for the Miami Dolphins with pick number 21. And then after pick number 21, we're going to go through the Philadelphia Eagles selection to then it would be the Jacksonville Jaguars now picking at 23. We've still got Dallas, Green Bay, Tampa, Arizona, Buffalo, Detroit, Baltimore, San Fran, and Kansas City. So still a lot of NFL draft to go. And don't forget, still a lot of NFL draft to go tomorrow. So stay with us. Not all night, but come back tomorrow for night 2 of the NFL draft. We're going to start a little earlier, though, 6 p.m. Eastern. Things get kicked off around 7, and we're going to have rounds 2 and 3. So picks will be flying fast and furious tomorrow. You don't have the wait time, which I know the NFL loves this, is the pomp and circumstance, and it is fun. But we want the picks, man. We just want the picks. We want the players already. We've had all of this time, so the pick is in for the Dolphins. As soon as we have it, we are going to go ahead and get that all set up. So there you have it. So let's continue on here. I'm going to kick it back to you, Andrew Erickson, and let's get Andrew here in a solo shot here. Andrew, give me your prediction for this pick for Miami.
So I know what the pick is. I'm cheating, so I can see it here. Defensive pass rusher, Chop Robinson, Penn State. I like the pick a lot. You know, it's funny. This is one of the bets I made really early on was Miami to go on the defensive line edge. Like, it was always plus money. For some reason, the books were convinced they were going to take an offensive lineman, but I just looked at their defensive line and it was just decimated.